the average age of TikTok down a bit.
Well, hopefully it looks like it works, which is great.
Ronnie, speak to us.
Howdy, I can't see myself on here. Perhaps I've not got the video.
Yeah. If you want to turn the camera on, tap where you are, where it would be the help going vegan, and you should get an option where you'll see like a camera and it'll be crossed off.
Oh yes.
And then you should have an option for save. You have to press save.
Yeah, you have to press save, as it won't remember. That's right.
Oh, I see. Now I'm on here now. Can you see me?
No,
you can't see me. So
I must have to press save. If you can see you, then there should be a save button before you come forward. Hi, Tammy. You're right. Or I don't know if it's Tammy or Kev.
All right.
It's me. Yeah, I've joined on Tammy's account because I was naughty last night.
Oh yeah. How long did you get a ban for?
7 days. I'm allowed to go live at midnight on the 8th.
Ah, there you go. You cracked it.
Hey, Ronnie.
Done it. Yeah, I'm in with the kids now. I'm down with. I'm down with the ute now.
Well,
you gotta do
at
all this
least
with
we
your
know we
fingers.
can do this
Yeah,
going forward.
Yeah, I'm lying on the bed because it's quite late for me now.
At least we know we can potentially do this now going forward, and we can get everybody on TikTok.
You can do, yeah. Does this? I mean, this is like how the screen is on here. I've got it on like it's kind of portrait, if you see what I mean. But if I rotate it, it kind of doesn't. It doesn't. Oh yes, I've gone the right way, but the other people haven't.
Yeah.
No, you're the wrong way now to us.
Yeah, the wrong way. See.
I'm not sure if I can change that.
So I've got to hold it in a weird way, this, haven't I?
No, maybe not.
Nah, TikTok doesn't like landscape for some strange reason.
I'm not very good at these settings, to be fair. I don't know whether I can change it.
Yeah.
I prefer the one where everybody is down the side, so you can see the comments better.
That's what I was trying to get. I never know which one it is. I just have to go through every various option until it gives me the one that suits.
Right.
That's bigger. Everyone's bigger.
There
now.
you go.
That's the one. That's the one.
Oh yeah.
I should honestly remember what that sequence is, so I don't have to go through.
What's popping? Popcorn's popping, Laura. Vegan Means Love is in the house.
Yeah. So if we haven't got Ronnie for too long, do we want to address our topic of discussion first, or wait for that, or how's best to proceed?
Yeah, there's a couple of issues. I messaged you, Ronnie. Do you remember that time when we spoke to this guy who was a negative utilitarian philosopher called David Pearce?
He was the one that wanted to kind of genetically modify predators, wasn't he? Is that the one?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I mean, my attitude to that was, look, you know, whatever the pros and cons of that, we're never going to get anywhere near to properly considering that until we've got like a vegan controlled society. So why bother to discuss it now? We can kick that down the road.
Well, he did kind of concede that point. He did say we've got to sort out the major vegan issues first.
Yeah.
He did say that.
But it seemed a bit weird doing that kind of interfering. You're risking other stuff going wrong, aren't you? That's what I worry about with it.
Yeah, I mean, there's potentially lots of factors that I don't see how we as humans could take into consideration without observing all of non-humans forever from every angle at every moment of their life to know the context of the particular situation that we're going to interfere in.
Yeah. I agree with that. You can have little micro cameras down every rabbit burrow and stuff.
I mean,
This is because that's what I mean. You'd have to be consistent across the board, and I can't see how that could ever happen, or how we'd ever be in a position to say we know for sure that by preventing this, we're not also going to cause this problem further down the line.
Yeah, it'd be like NASA with all these millions of screens and all these security people going, "We've got a problem in beehive number 27. Problem in beehive number 27." So because he said that we should have the technology to micromanage and he called it every cubic meter of the planet. Now, first of all, our ability to do that is questionable, right? I mean, whether it's a good idea in the first place, but we don't have a great track record, do we, of managing
Absolutely
anyone?
not. No.
But in order,
No.
I was just going to say that as well. Every time
Yeah,
we've got
that's the
involved, we've
issue.
cocked it right up.
Well, also, I suppose the other thing would be, I mean, just hypothetically to sort of run with it for a second, if we had the technology to insert miniature cameras down every rabbit burrow, is that not just an invasion of their privacy?
well, yeah, yes, and how would you get there? You see, if you were going to do that, you'd have to go deep into wild areas, wouldn't you? And
Yeah.
in doing, you would cause all sorts of damage. And really, what we need to be doing is just leaving other animals alone.
Exactly that. Yeah.
That's my point of view as well, Ronnie. It's like if we don't need to intervene, then why should we? I suppose. And
Oh, yeah, but he came back. Andy, you remember when he came back about the elephant and the dog, right?
Yeah. And I mean, obviously, if we were in a situation, I mean, I've been there myself. Where I found a hunt hound trapped in the barbed wire fence, and I wasn't preventing. There wasn't like I was interfering in a situation. There was only one victim, which was the hunt hound, and without my interference, they would remain there, which I can understand totally. But I don't think that compares to, say, stopping a dog versus a rabbit in a natural environment. That's not the same. There's a victim there potentially either way. I mean, maybe not a dog because it's not necessarily a necessity for feed, but if it was a fox versus a rabbit, me preventing the fox from a meal isn't just a fox potentially, is it? There could be fox, there could be cubs, there could be vixen, there could be many others that I'm depriving.
Yeah, that's a good point because often when you've got so-called rogue foxes, which is what the hunters call them, it's because they've killed one of the adult partners already.
Yeah.
And that means that the other has to do like a shortcut. And so they think, oh, I'll go for the chicken coop rather than where we normally go, and get nuts and berries and maybe slugs and snails and that kind of stuff. And so usually, as Kev said, if you've got a problem with other animals, your bottom dollar is that we've caused it somewhere along the line.
Yeah, that's true. And also, if say there's an animal caught in barbed wire or something, that's because humans have put that barbed wire there. We've fenced off an area that was in the past was the territory of other animals.
Yeah, well, fencing is an interesting thing from a vegan point of view because in a vegan world you wouldn't need fencing except for maybe thinking about deers and stuff. But obviously carrots don't get up and run away. I mean, the reason that farmers have fencing is to keep other animals in, usually, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, that is very true. I mean, yeah, that's a key point, isn't it? If you ever see fencing around huge fields, for example, it's not like it's mesh chicken coop that goes to the bottom to keep small animals out. It's only big enough to make sure that livestock can't escape. How it's designed.
And it's expensive as well, fencing.
Yeah.
I remember a talk back in the 80s where activists were thinking that if you couldn't get near the farm to rescue other animals, and that they've got a lot of land, which involves a lot of fencing, if you damage the fencing, you're doing a lot of economic sabotage because fencing is really expensive to put up,
Well, it's not even just the expense, is it? It's potentially how far you have to travel to even know that particular piece of fence is down and all of that sort of stuff. So, yeah, there's quite a lot of hassle involved.
I wonder if fencing is monitored by computers nowadays.
Some probably is.
So, yeah, I would say some probably is, yeah.
Everything's monitored by computers these days, pretty much, isn't it?
Yeah, but that's what David Pierce was saying, that we could do it then, in terms of the other animals.
But that's it's micro interference, isn't it? What you're talking about to carry out what he wants is micro interference with the natural world, which would mean going deep into wild areas, deep into nature, and tramping all over whatever you'd be tramping all over to go into those areas. So
You had to get your camping gear back out, Ronnie.
Camp-
David came up with this idea about if you saw an elephant drowning, would you try to rescue her?
yes, in that one-off situation, how I'd rescue an elephant, I'm kind of not really sure, but yes, I kind of would. Yes,
Yeah, but then you're depriving quite a few people of their dinner, then, aren't you?
I think you may. Yeah, it could be that some would feed off the elephant. Yes, I mean that kind of could be the case, but it seems to be a kind of natural reaction to to sort of do that. But it's a kind of one of you've come across that incident just in your everyday life, haven't you? You haven't gone round everywhere within nature to find an elephant drowning. You've come across that.
No, but you know that predation goes on, so therefore you'll be able to predict where it happens. Well, it kind of happens everywhere, doesn't it? So,
but I suppose it's also the question of why would the elephant be drowning? Would that be because of something that humans have done to cause that to happen? There's that question as well, isn't it? That like if you see for instance, like talk about wildlife hospitals, they'll take in animals that have been injured. Somebody finds an injured animal by the side of the road, take them to a wildlife hospital. Now, it could be argued, well, why not just leave that animal there to be predated on by others? But kind of, we wouldn't do that. Or I certainly wouldn't do that. I'd be off to the wildlife hospital with the animal. I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
what about putting them out of their misery? I mean, I found a rabbit with Mixie once, and I thought the only thing I could do was kill him, really.
Yeah, I've done the same. It depends on the situation. With Mixie, there's no hope or cure for that.
No, so there's no point in taking him to a hospital. That's what I'm saying.
No, but I've taken. I mean, I'm there's time I'm forever taking hedgehogs to one of our wildlife hospitals all the time. Because of when it gets to like the autumn time and you get the small ones that haven't put enough weight on to be able to survive the winter, and sometimes I've found them wandering about and they look after them over the winter at the wildlife. Things like that. Now somebody could say, "Well, just leave that hedgehog die, and then another animal will eat that hedgehog."
Well, it's true though, isn't it? So it causes a bit of a moral dilemma, doesn't it, in a way?
But we kind of do that. But I don't think we said it's wrong to do that, to take that animal to the wildlife hospital. But it's a question of like, I suppose, the degree of interference that we're going to carry out. Really, I mean, that's an extreme degree of.
Yeah, you mean we draw the lines. Ian runs on plants says, what is the position on invasive species? So first of all, we'd have to decide we'd have to define what that meant. I mean, obviously, I suppose we're thinking about grey squirrels, for example, right?
Humans, aren't we?
Yeah,
that's where, but my mind always goes whenever I think of invasive species, humanity.
Yeah.
When the word pest is used, yeah.
But you see, I think the thing is, it's so complicated now because if you take say the UK, there's loads of species now in the UK that aren't native, and then when you're trying to consider that, it's a question of how far back do we go? If you're considering a species not to be native, does that mean one that's not where they've not made their own way here, where they're brought humans? You see, because species made their way. I mean, at one time, say the UK, well, or Britain, the islands was joined to the continent, wasn't it? And they were able to walk across. And then that became separated, and they weren't able to do that anymore. And then any species would have been brought by humans, like for instance cats. They're not native to.
Yeah, we were connected, and then the French farmers dug the English Channel.
Yeah, you can't really blame them in a way. But so how do you kind of determine? I mean, you know, those animals are here now, aren't they? And that's it. I don't think you can really, if you're going to repatriate every species that's
Well, the thing is, though, Ronnie, if you think of a society or a country like Australia, I mean, we've created havoc there by introducing rabbits, and I think it was hunters who might have done that.
Yes, or perhaps people that wanted them for food. It's the same. I mean, loads of animals were introduced to Australia. Like, I mean, kind of sheep, for instance. Although I think sheep were introduced to the UK as well, because I don't think even sheep are native to the UK. People think they are, but I think they come. I think they come from the Near East or somewhere like that originally. They're not native to the UK, which is why they say foot rot and stuff like that.
Yeah, well, that wasn't one of the questions that came up with this David Pearce guy. He's a negative utilitarian for people who are just joining, and he thinks that we should use our godlike powers, as he put it, to micromanage every cubic meter of the earth and to stop the suffering of free living beings. But I don't think anybody asked him whether the idea would be to kind of go back to some first position where everybody was in place, as it were. Because, you know, all the ones that we've brought over, for example, then, you know, is it our responsibility to take them back? Because obviously where they came from is now full again with subsequent generations.
Yep.
Yeah. It's like me and Annie were on a live a couple of weeks ago, and there was a guy, an Australian guy, talking about some toad or frog that's a really invasive species.
Cane toad, yeah.
Yeah, and we were literally like, we don't know a vegan way around that problem. We also don't know enough about the problem, to be honest with you, obviously. But it's some of these things might not necessarily have.
What was the problem, Kev?
Oh, Andy, you might remember better than me.
So essentially, this guy was talking about cane toads, and he's saying that over the years, they've more or less developed an invulnerability. No predators can obviously consume them because they're poisonous, but they're no longer like the pesticides or whatever it was that they used to use are no longer effective. So they're essentially becoming invincible.
And
I wouldn't know in this day and age what the vegan solution was to that problem.
No, well, what Reagan would say is that we need people of goodwill to come together to try to figure out those kind of things, because there are some things, you know, you remember with the famous late show, the late show, to quote Tommy Tiernan, the audience started to rib him a bit because he answered about 3 times, oh, well, that's a difficult question. But he often did that because if he came up against a difficult question, he said, well, that's a difficult question. He was honest about it. You know, he wasn't one of these people who thought that you had to have some glib answer to everything, because, you know, some things are very complicated.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Can the cane toads be, can they be kind of neutered or spayed? Is that possible?
I'm not sure. I mean, in theory, that would be a more workable solution, but it's not something I know enough about to say yes or no.
You mean like contraceptives, you mean?
Yeah, like some sort of sterilisation, I suppose, would be, but how it would be, yeah. But I honestly don't know enough about them.
I suppose that's what we do with stray cats at the minute, isn't it? We catch, spay, release in certain parts of the world.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I've done that.
In theory, I suppose, it could potentially be a possibility. I suppose it's the logistics about how do you catch them all.
And also, technically, it's a rights violation.
Well, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
and I think handling them would be a severe issue.
Yeah. I think the difficulty is that you're kind of placed in this position of choosing what is not a perfect solution. Is it's only the lesser of two evils. That situation by the actions of others. So the fact that we can't adopt the ideal solution, which is just kind of leaving them alone, the fact we can't do that isn't our fault. It's the fault of others. We're not to blame for that.
Seeing that comment from Joanna, that's great. Somebody keeps saying they want a bacon sandwich. So Jonas says, "Yeah, well, I really want a bacon sandwich made of you."
Yes, a bacon sandwich. Yeah. It's funny how, you know, provoke this desire for sandwiches in people, isn't it? So strange. Uh, some reason.
So we're not keen on this negative utilitarian idea, because people like Humane Hancock became a modern day advocate for this interference, and obviously you've got issues like lab meat now. I mean, so in other words, if we had this elaborate distribution system, you could be taking lab meat to all the obligate carnivores, but then you're going to get, because obligate carnivores take out the weak and the old, and so then you're going to get a skewed increase in the prey side of the equation. So it just seems to me that there's kind of problems wherever you go with this idea.
100%. And I mean, yeah, I mean, for me, it's, do we need to get involved? And if we don't, then I suppose what gives us the right to violate the rights of others?
Well, he was saying suffering. If we know someone is suffering, then don't we have a responsibility to intervene?
But it depends if intervening in that suffering causes other suffering elsewhere.
Yeah, that's the issue. And I think in most of these instances, you've got no real way of knowing what the repercussions of your actions are. You can only see what's in front of you.
Yeah. But also...
And that's the population you can actually see. Like Ronnie said, what about, well, Andy said, what about all the ones who live underground or, in very...
Or even in the ocean, I'm assuming we're going to be consistent here. So great white sharks are going to have to be monitored. All the fish are going to have to be, all the seals are going to need to be protected from them. This is a mass operation just to cover the oceans.
This is the job for Stingray. Stingray.
We can't even map most of the ocean, and all of a sudden we're going to protect prey from. It's just not feasible, is it?
No, it seems to be incredibly optimistic about the capabilities of human beings, isn't it? Really?
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that I always think about is that animals have got the natural right to display their natural behavior, and if you remove that from an obligate carnivore, then that's a massive rights violation.
Well, not just that as well. I mean, I might just be hypothesizing a bit. Like, for example, if a deer manages to outrun a pack of wolves, I mean, obviously, I'm not talking about having a conversation where they all get high-fived, but there must be an element of respect from the others for things like that. Isn't that like how hierarchies are formed? The biggest, the bravest, the toughest, or whatever, potentially becomes the leader of the group. So isn't that how these situations, don't they help and develop their society too?
You mean they get together and go, "Oh, that's Jeff over there. He's really fast."
But you know what I mean? It's kind of like, isn't this how these things kind of work in that sense too? And how they learn how to adapt or not to nest in this particular area anymore. They learn from experience. Whereas if you're interfering in that,
which is why the obligate carnivores take out the lame and the not actually quite sure if you can say lame anymore, but the kind of injured and the infirm and the elderly.
Those that aren't very fast are able to escape, essentially.
Yeah, because Dr. Milton Mills says that on that grounds alone, it shows that humans are terrible, terrible hunters, because we always want to take the best of the species, whereas a real carnivore will take the weak, and so that would improve the gene pool, whereas we weaken it. So it just goes to show that we're not even good. I mean, you know it's like on social media. You see all those horrible people stood smirking next to giraffes who they've killed and stuff, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But also, like, if you're in a survival situation and you're going to go for the hardest meal, or you're going to go for the easiest possible outcome, you're gonna catch the first animal that you were able to catch up to, aren't you? As an obligate carnivore, obviously.
Yes, that's it. Yeah, so that's right. Yeah,
it makes sense. And then, like you say, it strengthens the gene pool. It potentially enables the
They
rest
can't
of the
afford not
herd
to
to
either, Kev,
thrive.
because it's very hit and miss. If they don't get a meal, then that's it. They're Jake then for a couple of days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, can't like it's not a great life to be an obligate carnivore in, say, the Serengeti or whatever, because if they don't manage to catch anyone, then that means they just don't eat for a couple of days until they recover, because they're really built for little bursts of
Yeah.
speed.
Yeah. Well, not to mention potentially the risks that they take too. I mean, if they're going after something like a water buffalo or whatever, every single time they charge is a risk.
Yeah,
And
because
if they
they'll
get
kick out
injured,
backwards
they
and
can.
that, won't they?
Yeah, and I mean, I've seen videos myself where a lion will get injured in the chase and end up becoming prey for hyena.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I mean, when
That's
you're
right,
going to Tesco and buying, there's no risk there, is there? It's not like you've got someone that's trying to take that off you. I mean, apart from maybe Black Friday.
Maybe we ought to create a risk for people. Let's go to buy.
We ought to get loads of vegans going into a supermarket in combat gear, and doing all that kind of military kind of, this way and that way and all that, kind of, and going, what are you doing? You say, well, we're hunting.
We're yeah, we're hunting in the meat aisle.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Hey, everyone that's just joined. Sorry, I'm not doing a very good job of reading the chat.
And you have to do that thing with the eyes, don't you? That's what they do, isn't it? Kind of.
Yeah.
No, I was just reading. The article that David Pearce cites, the baby elephant one.
Yeah.
If you actually go and read it, the reason that those workers were on site to help was because the hole was caused by building a road. So kind of human problem.
Again, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, although that's his example of like human acts of compassion, actually not necessarily.
Why do
More of
plant burgers have
obligation of
blood in them?
responsibility
Asked
because they
Kerry.
caused the issue to begin with. Yeah.
Why had a plant? Well, I've never had a plant burger with the blood in it.
No, it's usually
It's usually beetroot juice.
Beetroot juice, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I've never even had one of them with beetroot.
Well, I mean, if you look at a steak, for example, that's not blood.
I suppose the answer to the question, why do some vegan burgers have blood in them still? The same reason why we're doing lab-grown meat, because we understand that some people still want the taste, the texture, and the experience of meat.
Yeah.
If we could have that without all of the exploitation and rights violations and harm, then why would we not have that? Why would we not be morally obligated to do that?
Yeah, that's interesting. That brings up some sociological issues in the sense that what most people don't understand is that they have to train their palate as a child to get used to the food that they're used to, which is why you've got some cultures who eat the kind of food that everybody else thinks, oh, blimey, that's too hot, or it's, that's not nice, and this kind of stuff, right? And so when you go vegan, it just means an element of retraining. It's like most people don't like their first cigarette that they ever have, and most people don't like their first pint of beer. And so you've got to get used to it, and then culturally you do. It's like those people who like so-called game, which really is rotting flesh game, isn't it? Because they hang it up in sheds for ages. But they kind of make a kind of virtue out of things that most people wouldn't like. Oh, this is tough and all that kind of stuff. And so it's kind of chewy kind of flesh. And they make a virtue out of it. And so then, therefore, there's an entire culture that goes, oh, yeah, this is brilliant. When everybody else is thinking, it's like turkeys at Christmas. Most people don't like turkey flesh. And yet most people go and buy it.
Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah.
Really weird. So, Andy, are you in a position to?
Yeah, do you want me to play that video?
Yeah. What happened?
There's an interesting thing here about Cat. Did you see that question about what do we think about Cat?
No, feel free. I haven't been paying much attention to the chat. I was reading this news article that David Pearce had provided. So,
what do you guys think about cats in urban areas decimating bird populations? And I mean, my view is I prefer to see cats kept as indoor animals and that's for two reasons. First of all, because they do predate very, very heavily on sort of wildlife populations, and we have to remember that cats aren't a native animal to this country. They're not a native. They're native predator to this country. That's the one thing to say. But secondly, there's a really big risk to the cats themselves. That the outside world here is a really risky environment for cats. With motor vehicles, with people out to poison cats, other things going on.
Yeah.
That I think that I mean, for instance, if someone has. We have cats. They're rescued cats, and they're indoor. We have them as indoor cats. But say if someone has a rescued rat or a rescued hamster or a rescued mouse, they wouldn't just let those animals free. They wouldn't let those animals run loose into the wild because they consider that the risk to those animals would be too great to justify that. And I tend to think that's the situation for cats as well. I think there's so many cats here where I live that are outdoor cats have been killed on the roads. Loads have been killed. And that's why I really advocate they be kept as indoor animals for their own safety and to protect wildlife, to protect free living beings.
Yeah, here's a question flowing from that, Ronnie, and it's about Britain. So I don't really know the answer, which is since one of the things you said about the hunt ban is generally speaking it's not been great, but the big thing it has done is stop organised hare coursing, right?
Yes.
And I wonder whether it's increased kind of like informal hare coursing and stuff. Because I was going to go on to say that because there used to be a problem with cats being taken off the street, to be put into bags for training, but that was dogfighting rather than hare coursing, wasn't it? So
yeah,
yeah.
And also I think to some extent possibly maybe training greyhounds for racing as well, although that sometimes rabbits would be taken in use for that. I think there was a degree of that, but yeah, I think it kind of was mainly dogfighting.
I think the issue that we've also got we'd have to take into consideration is though with the induction of the internet and terrible websites like Gumtree, and the people no longer have to go and take cats from the street. They can literally just message someone and go and pick them up from their house, no problem, no questions asked. So
yeah, there is that kind of being conned and that. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
See, going back to the hare coursing, you see that the kind of rough coursing where they go into a field with a few greyhounds or lurchers and chase hares is kind of very, very different to the organised coursing where you had the big coursing club and loads of spectators.
Was Ronnie frozen?
He's frozen here mid conversation.
So somebody in the chat is saying that they need my KFC. Be interesting that this is user 086450. That's like a phone number, I suppose, isn't it? The thing is, user whatever those numbers are, without me going through them again. Why don't you try the plant-based KFC, and then come back next week and tell us what you made of it?
Yeah, because I've never tried it, so you can let me know what it tastes like. Oh, we lost Ronnie.
Yeah, so it's called the what is KFC?
I have no idea what the KFC one's called. In fact,
it's the vegan fillet burger.
The vegan fillet burger. Okay.
Yeah, I've actually tried it when we first went vegan. I used to take the kids there instead of going to McDonald's. Basically, when we first went plant-based, because this is before McDonald's kind of coined in on the green pound, if you will. But first time I went, I was convinced to give us a meat burger, like a chicken flesh burger. So that's what you're looking for. I suppose it's a good replacement for that.
Yeah, it's dead interesting, isn't it? Because we've got lots of evidence now where they've done these kind of so-called blind tests, and people from even like the flesh industry, they don't know. It happened live on TV in a Joey Carlstrong thing once, and then we had the sausage guy recently on the Jeremy Vine show, who was supposed to be the Britain's sausage expert, and he got completely fooled by it. And yet you get loads of people on TikTok going, "Oh, I've tried that and it's absolutely horrible." That is just a lie.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not on this account because I lost my other account, but I remember having the original video will still be on TikTok somewhere. But there was a guy that they were chickless wings, I think, from Aldi, and he made a video about how delicious they were until he read the box, and then completely changed his mind. And I remember stitching it on my old account and being like, "This is a perfect example," because it's all in your brain.
Yeah, mind over matter, that, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, I'll have to try and find that video again because I'm sure it's like the creators probably still got theirs up. But yeah, they were like that. I'm sure they were Aldi like chickless fillets or chickless wings or something along those lines. And he was like, "These are weird. Like, where's the bone?" And then he read the packet.
I've seen
and
that
realised that they were
Iceland.
plant-based, and all of a sudden changed his opinion completely.
People are celebrating you coming back, Ronnie. We were disappointed.
I don't know what happened there. I had a thing saying the host has paused the live stream, but obviously that wasn't the case.
No, sometimes TikTok's a bit funny as long as you didn't get banned.
Yeah, it's kind of.
No, we just wanted to get rid of you, Ronnie. That's all it was.
Great to be banned after only being on here 5 minutes, wouldn't it?
It wouldn't surprise me the way TikTok is. Yeah.
No.
I've been banned for nudity before when I've not even been on camera, so beat that.
So this other issue that I wanted to talk about, are we able to show this clip, Andy?
Let me move my thing and I'll play the video.
It's a very short clip. Now, just for the context of this, I did a time tunnel last Thursday, a couple of days ago, and because a tenacious person in the chat found this full-length video of a debate that I thought had been lost forever. I mean, I'd been looking for it for about 20 odd years and it wasn't around. And but we found it, or at least it was found. And so I played it the other day. And there's one bit where Richard Ryder, who's used to be a psychologist, now a philosopher, gets asked a question about which other animals does animal rights cover, as it were. So let's see if we can get that. Yeah. I'll shut up.
One to each side. And if I could ask Richard Ryder, first of all, who was for the motion, of course, to deal with the point that Mr. Beebe raised, which was that what do you do about things like rabid foxes, about the slugs which cause bilharzia in Africa, and about the mosquitoes that cause so much death and suffering from malaria? If you could just deal with that point, please, before...
I think we should emphasize the species that we have very good grounds for believing are sentient, that's to say, are conscious and can suffer pain. That's what we should get on with. That covers all the mammals to start with and a lot of other species as well. And that is more than enough to be getting on with. Let's start arguing the toss about the insects at this stage. Let's get on with trying to save the other non-human mammals, the reptiles, and one or two of the more intelligent octopuses and squids, who certainly do suffer pain and indeed can suffer psychologically as well. Those are the ones we should be concentrating on, the ones that certainly suffer pain.
And what about Professor Terry's cat, who would fade away altogether if he and his wife became vegetarians?
Well, no, he wouldn't. I mean, I think that some species are carnivores, but we are not. We have a choice on whether or not we eat vegetables or meat.
All right, thank you very much indeed. Now,
he did a good job at dodging the question there at the end.
Coming from
yeah,
it's you see how I look at things like you see if you're talking about speciesism is considering that humans are more important than other sentient animals, isn't it? Basically, and so I always say, well, look, if if there's some kind of problem from another animal, that we shouldn't treat that other animal any differently than if that same problem was being caused by humans in the same circumstances. In other words, if those mosquitoes that were causing a problem were like loads of small humans that were causing that problem, that were at the same kind of level intellectually and in terms of feeling or whatever as the mosquitoes, we shouldn't treat the mosquitoes any differently than we would treat the humans in that circumstance.
Are you saying we can think of like zombie movies here, Ronnie?
Well, well, I don't know. Think about zombie movies at any time, I suppose. But do you see what I'm trying to say? That we shouldn't.
Yeah, but what I'm getting at, right, is that as the mosquito, or say kind of like a so-called plague of locust.
Yes.
Now, what you're dealing there with is what Reagan would call a moral patient, who don't know that they're causing harm to others. They're just living their lives, and
Yes.
but they're attacking you or your interests, and they won't stop. A little bit like zombies, right? And so
Yeah. Oh, yes.
this is where the animal rights theory locks into the idea of self-defense, because people like Alex O'Connor said, well, if they've got a right to life, then you can't do anything. Well, that's not true. It's like, we all have rights to life, but if one of us start attacking one of the others and wouldn't listen and wouldn't stop, then they've got the right to self-defense. And so in that sense, we invoke self-defense. But what Ryder was talking about was this distinction between those who are sentient and those who are not. And in some senses, technically, although this kind of is a subtle point and it kind of creates a bit of nuance, technically, animal rights doesn't cover all animals. It only covers sentient ones. And basically, that's what he was saying. And so it seems to me, because when I saw that again after so many years, I was thinking, blimey, this is kind of part of the crop deaths thing, because they talk about insecticides. What about all the insects and all that? Well, we don't see. We normally go for the thing about benefit of the doubt, right? But it's not that clear whether insects are sentient beings or not. We tend to say, well, we're not sure, but we're giving them the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, there are other problems with pesticides apart from that they directly kill insects. There's the harmful effects. I mean, by killing those insects, then that has an impact on those.
Well, I said insecticides.
Insecticides, yes, yeah. So you've got that problem as well.
Yeah, I just wondered whether, generationally, as it were, with Andy and Kev being here, is whether we'd be comfortable about saying to the crop deaths people, well, you're talking about insects. We don't know whether they're covered by animal rights. And that is a kind of true statement, but it's uncomfortable.
Yeah. I mean, well, we've tried everything else.
Well, that's not quite what.
But yeah, no, I totally mean. I get what you're saying. I suppose the issue would be was we already get accused of picking and choosing, and I think that would fall back into those parameters where they're saying we're dictating because insects aren't cute and cuddly. They wouldn't take the sentience part into consideration.
No, but that's the criteria though, and unfortunately, I mean, like nobody's going to talk about cute. Well, yeah, I get your point. They do talk about cute, but we're talking about sentience. We just have to insist on the point.
Yeah.
To quote Mary Warnock, and just say, look, our criteria is sentience, and so if they're not sentience, then in a way they're not covered. Now, generally speaking, we give them the benefit of the doubt. But if they start to attack us, it would be easier to, as it were, deal with them than it would be for a genuine other sentient rights bearer.
Yeah.
And so I just thought that was an interesting kind of argument,
We have a child that's desperately trying to request, but I'm not even entertaining them tonight.
If somebody does come on, I'll be a lot better behaved than I was last night. A little bit too much dizzy water, and I think I was just blown off steam last night, so I completely just lost
To
all
be fair,
faith.
I don't think it wasn't justified.
You're talking about Mario.
Yeah.
Is that Super Mario or less than Super Mario?
I think they're less than Super Mario.
Mm. So what do you think? What do you think then in terms of when they make the crop deaths argument against vegans? They're mainly talking about those individuals that, even in theoretical terms, we're not sure about. And another caveat to that is that Reagan always said, well, look, wherever you draw the line, and he accepts the idea that animal rights theory does draw lines, there's also grey areas. We've talked about that for years, right? But he always said, draw the line in pencil because it's going to move. And it seems to me that when you put all those things together, that even further weakens the crop deaths argument against us, I think.
True.
I suppose the way I look at it is if something is unavoidable, in reality, because in theory it's not, but in the reality that we live in it is, because we've got no control over whether we choose to buy foods that have used pesticides or not, etc., then you would look to contribute towards that the least amount possible. And that, for me, is an argument for veganism, because the crop deaths aren't just going to be for the plant matter that we consume as on an omnivorous diet. It's also the plant matter that the cows and chickens, pigs, goats, whatever else it is that you're consuming, what they're consuming. So it's a much larger number of crop deaths that happen through that, until we're at a point where we can develop something which makes it avoidable.
Yeah, and I mean, even say at that point, let's roll forward 10 years and say that, vertical farming is slowly become the norm. That's only going to be in westernized countries, isn't it? That it's not going to be across the world. It's going to take a long time for some of these other countries to catch up with that, even if some of the more developed and richer countries actually seize the initiative. It's going to take a long time for that to actually span out everywhere. I mean, look at the way that some of these, say, third world countries are still agriculturally farming.
Yeah, but that'd be up to the more developing nations to help out the so-called developing. The more developed nations should help out in the same ways. First of all, we'd sort out the subsidy situation within our own society, but then you'd want to extend that to the so-called developing nations, right? So we do it with our money, because as some of the farmers who talk to us say, it's the startup cost which is a problem, right? Not necessarily the running, not necessarily that they're totally against it. It's just that they're looking at their dairy farm and they're thinking, well, look, it's all set up. How many thousands of quid did that cost? And now you're saying scrap all this and start again. So that is pretty scary for a dairy farmer.
Yeah.
And so I think the only way we can do it is to either help and to intervene and help in that sense, or we just carry on making the vegan community bigger, and that means that they're going to be forced to do it by economics.
Yeah, and I suppose taking that point into consideration, a lot of these places that we would consider prehistoric in their methods have actually got far less to invest to become up to date. It's not like they've got to replace £1 million worth of dairy technology, is it? They've got to replace a wooden shed and a bucket. So, it's actually much easier for them to be brought into modern day with a bit of investment, as opposed to someone. So, actually, I suppose that argument works both ways.
Yeah, and also it would take more seriously this idea that we adhere to human rights, and I was always struck by this phrase that I heard years and years ago, which is that we kind of live in a global village. Well, we don't behave as though we do. No. Because we let half of our village starve to death.
That's very true. Dave
is saying about KFC. Well, again, a challenge to you then, Dave. If you go and have because Joanna said that they had a vegan KFC, whatever they're called, and it was way better. It's bound to be superior. There's no rights violations in it. But Dave, you try You try the vegan one and come back next week and tell us honestly what you made of it.
Because with regard to food production, it's interesting that George Monbiot's just made a video in which he says, he poses the question, what is the greatest threat to life on Earth? And the answer to that is
farming, wasn't it?
The answer to that is farming, and mostly animal farming. It's the greatest threat to life on Earth because of the harm that it causes to the environment in all sorts of different ways, including the huge contribution it makes to the climate crisis. And he advocates something called bacterial fermentation for the production of protein and oil. In other words, you don't grow those things in the ground at all. You use bacterial fermentation to produce it, and the units that you need to construct to to carry out that process can be very localized. Say each town could have one.
Ronnie, Jim is saying this can't be kind of scaled up to make it a real world farming issue, because he's saying it might work. You see, people say that about vertical farming. Well, it might work in a little box, but
no. And the thing is, it can kind of work. It can work anywhere, because as long as you need energy for it, that you have to have electricity to power it. But the small kind of, I suppose they're like kind of factory units that would need to be set up to do it. You could provide, according to what George Monbiot says anyway, you could supply enough protein and fat for the whole world from an area the size of London, you see. And when you compare that with the massive area of land that's used at present to produce crops and even more so animals, to produce protein and fat, it means that a very large area of land could be rewilded, could go back to nature, which would be beneficial in all sorts of ways. So,
or more football pitches, but
I think it's very interesting, kind of, very, very interesting concept, and it kind of is like an even better alternative in a sense than lab grown meat. I think it's an even more efficient process than that for producing fat and protein.
Jim's come back again and said what he's saying, that we can feed the world within 50 square miles of area. Well, I think London is bigger than that, but
what he's saying is obviously these units that produce the fat and protein from bacterial fermentation, would be spread throughout the world. But if you brought them all together, the total amount of space that they would take up.
Oh yeah, it wouldn't be a question of exporting it all from the London.
Yeah, I mean, it's no different than when people make the comparison about the size of the planet versus how small a space you could fit every human being. It doesn't mean that they could live in that space. It just means theoretically there would be enough.
It'd be like a battery cage, wouldn't it, Andy?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's a very small area. It's like a dot on the map, basically. But obviously, they're not talking about everyone could coexist and live there for the rest of their life. They're just saying if they had to force them into one area, that's how small it would be.
And those are crops that, in a sense, cause the most environmental damage, because obviously, the animal farming that's used to produce protein is harmful in all sorts of ways, and particularly to the animals that are used, but also in terms of the environment, in terms of the climate and all that.
But Ronnie, what is he? I mean, what is the practical? I mean, are we talking about the sci-fi thing of taking a couple of plants and a couple of tablets a day, and that's your food?
No. It's actually it can actually be made into anything we currently have. For instance, there is a prototype unit. I can't remember whether it's somewhere like Holland or Belgium, somewhere like that, where they got a prototype unit, producing this. And he went over there and had a pancake that was produced through bacterial fermentation, and it tasted exactly the same as, you know, a kind of pancake he'd had in the past, and obviously maybe the eggs.
That's quite a statement, isn't it? I went over there and had a pancake.
Yeah. So yeah. So it can be used to produce all sorts of tastes and flavors and stuff, and it's a really efficient form of food production that frees up a massive amount of land.
Nuala Ann Pill says, "Where are you getting that proof?" Let me guess, Google. You were citing George Monbiot, weren't you?
No, it's George Monbiot. It's there's also a website that I'll see if I can find the
Maybe George Monbiot was busy Googling.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Google at the end of the day is just a tool. There's no problem with Google.
Exactly.
The problem is potentially with some of the information that's on Google and accessible through Google. But that's not, Google is no better resource than an encyclopedia from back in the day or a library.
Google's essentially just a navigation tool for the internet.
If you, I can find a website that will tell me the Earth's flat. That's not Google's fault.
Yeah, I mean, it's like saying, oh, your information's flawed because you found it by putting a Google search in. It's like, well, no. If I'm on like Wikipedia, then maybe you could argue because anyone can edit that. And there's a lot of misinformation on Wikipedia on certain things before it's kind of fact checked and put right. But if you're putting a Google search in for what Ronnie's just been talking about, and you've found, non-industry funded, peer-reviewed studies and research on that topic, and you're able to read and understand that, then Google's a fantastic tool for finding that information.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, on top of that, you've also got the ability straight away when you found that to go cross-reference it and check it with other places, all in one place.
The website to look at that goes into all this is one called rebootfood.org. Reboot, REBOOT, food.org. That's the website that goes into all of this.
Reboot Food.
Reboot
607 square miles. Yeah, that sounds more likely.
Yeah.
Boot your food down the road.
Yeah. So that's so it's because you see the kind of there's been there's an argument that the major contributor to the climate crisis is actually animal agriculture. There's an organisation called Climate Healers that produced a paper on it, and they've come to the conclusion that animal agriculture is actually 87% responsible for global heating. And the reason for that is, I mean, obviously you get the emissions from animal agriculture. You get the methane that's produced from it. There's something, people talk about cows' farts and the manure and all that kind of thing. There is that, but the main reason why animal agriculture is so heavily responsible for the climate crisis is to do with something called opportunity costs, and that's to do with the amount of land that animal farming takes up that could be rewilded, could go back to forest, and which would draw the carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. And it's because we're losing that opportunity to do that because of animal farming that makes it so responsible for global heating.
Yeah, it'd be a cleansing thing, wouldn't it, to reforest?
Yeah, because it's because the forests have gone. Part of the reason we have we have global heating is because so much forest has been cleared.
Yeah, I mean, England's a perfect example of that, right? Like, I mean, we've got some of the worst biodiversity around because of this. We used to be once upon a time almost completely forested, and you can see this and other things. What I'm trying to think is Easter Island with the statues.
Yeah,
that's a really good sort of example of what happens when there's no trees left.
Yeah, they cut all of them down, didn't they?
Yeah, every single tree was cut down to essentially move those moai things, and now they've got some of the worst soil erosion problems on the planet. In fact, most of those moais are actually like full bodies, and you can only see the tops of the heads.
But also, I think all the human population had to move, didn't they?
That's correct. Yeah, I think they only go there now for like tourism related
tourism or something.
Yeah. But yes, so soil erosion. I mean, deforestation isn't just problematic in terms of wildlife and everything else. It's seriously problematic in terms of people don't realize how much the trees help when it rains, for example, all these kind of things, because they have to fall through the leaves and the branches, and obviously a lot of the rain is absorbed then by the roots. You take all the trees away, and all of a sudden your soil, in a very short space of time, becomes very soft and very durable. It starts to fall apart, crack off, fall into the ocean. Yeah.
Are we playing the bingo game? Alex Montclair says, look at how many get shot, trapped, and poisoned to protect the things you eat. Yeah, that's right. Well, this is the classic kind of crop deaths argument. And the real issue there for me is like, which of all the populations or the groups, communities on the planet are concerned about that? I mean, it's sure not flesh eaters, and it's not dairy consumers. It's vegans.
Yeah,
because we want to stop that as well if we can figure out how.
Well, it's not even an argument against veganism. It's an argument against the farmers, which is incredibly disrespectful.
Yeah.
Because like we're not in control of the practices that the farmers deploy. The farmers are in control of those practices.
Well, what about people like you must know Paul, Kev, you know, the kind of, I mean, he almost like celebrates the fact that he poisons so many other animals. He seems to, but I mean, I think he's doing that mainly to mock vegans, but he's kind of going, oh, you know, I love kind of poisoning them and shooting them and all this kind of stuff, right?
Yeah. See, it's
not. I hadn't interacted with him until I think I mentioned him to you. And then he popped up on me one of my videos, and I was like, "Oh, here we go." And I think I responded to him maybe 5 or 6 times, and could just feel my IQ level dropping, so I had to refrain.
But you see, it's not that these people are concerned about the deaths of those animals anyway. They don't care about the deaths of animals. They're just grasping at anything to try and kind of cling on to their, habit of consuming animal products, really. But you see, if people are genuinely concerned about the deaths of those animals who are snared, poisoned, etc.,
become a vegan.
Then the way to minimise the deaths of those animals is actually to become vegan, and the reason for that is far more crops are grown to feed people who eat animal products than are grown to feed vegans, and that is because the animals that are reared are fed on those crops. A hell of a lot of agricultural land used to grow crops is used to grow crops to feed farmed animals. So if the population is vegan, we would actually have to grow fewer crops because we'd have no farmed animals to have to feed those crops to in the first place. And so, those people that want to poison and snare animals to preserve crops would be doing a lot less of it because less would be needed. Fewer crops would be needed.
Here's an interesting one again from Jim. We lost 97% of hay meadows since World War II, talking about Britain, mainly because of arable farming. So arable farming, that's not just going to, I mean, that's what you're just talking about.
Yeah, a lot of arable farming, though, is really a really high percentage of the arable farming is used to grow crops to feed to farmed animals.
Yeah, I mean, would the creation of silage be called arable farming, for example?
I'm not really.
I think so.
It's certainly the use of land.
But the other thing to extend from what Ronnie said, which would also take that into consideration, is if we had this hypothetical quote-unquote vegan world, not only would we be requiring significantly less plants to grow, but we could look at new ways of growing them that don't involve arable farming in any way, shape, or form. So we could actually eliminate crop deaths in the way that we farm, not only on top of the fact that those numbers would be greatly reduced too. We could look at methods that don't use fields or soil or rely on the weather or relying on destroying ecosystems.
Yeah, but who is the only people who are even kind of thinking in these terms? It's vegans.
Yeah.
The ones that are getting the piss taken out of us because of it.
I think at every turn, if we had a vegan administration, at every turn we'd be looking at ways in which we could minimise harmful human impact on other animals, including the impact caused by farming. So all the time we'd be searching for ways of doing it that would minimise the death and suffering of other animals, because that would be part of our ethos. So the only way that that situation is going to be achieved is by creating more vegans. So eventually, we're the ones that run the show, to be honest. That's the only way that's going to happen. And so if people are concerned about all these things, then, become vegan and educate other people to become vegan.
Yeah, I think one way to start a conversation, and going back to kind of people of goodwill almost, is for non-vegans to realize that it's not true when they say two things. They say either we don't know about crop deaths, and the vegan community have been talking about crop deaths since at least the 1950s, as far as I can see in the archives. Or it's not that they don't know, but they don't care. And again, we're the ones who care more than anybody else. It's just that it's not a question of going into a supermarket and there's two packets of carrots, and one says crop death free and the other one says this involved crop deaths.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we would pick the crop death free ones, right? But we can't do that. It's not possible to do that. So the consumer part of veganism doesn't work with crop deaths. It's a much more structural problem.
I mean, the consumer part of things, which would minimise crop deaths, is for people to consume vegan. That's the choice that minimises crop deaths for the reasons that I've already said, because the huge number of crops there. I mean, for instance, like if you're talking about crop deaths, deaths caused in order to grow crops, then you only have to look at the Amazon. How the Amazon's been cleared and all the, wild animals, free living beings in the Amazon suffered and died because of that clearance. The vast majority of that has been done for animal farming, either to clear land to put the animals on, or to clear land to grow crops to feed to the animals. The vast majority of soya grown in the world, soy, isn't grown so vegans can have a carton of soya milk. It's grown to produce a protein food to feed farmed animals.
Oh, we don't drink soy milk, Ronnie. We only drink almond milk, and all of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you see, it's not so that the reason why the Amazon is being cleared is because of animal farming, and that you could perhaps that's the biggest scene of crop deaths of all. Where you've got vegetation being cleared to farm animals. And it's the same with another thing. Going back to talking about, Andy was talking about forests here in the UK. What a lot of people don't realise is that we actually have rainforests here in the UK. I think this, in Wales, and I think on the northwest coast, we have small areas of rainforest. Now, those areas used to be huge. We used to have loads of rainforest here in the UK, and that's often thought of as a tropical thing. But the rainforests here are actually temperate rainforests, not tropical rainforests, but still rainforests. And a major reason why those have gone is because of animal farming. And so if we were able to, if we got rid of animal farming and we were able to rewild, let land go back to nature, then those rainforests would be restored.
Yeah, and I mean, that's another part of this whole crop death argument, right? Like, if there are plenty of wild flowers and wild plants all over the place, then these insects and these small animals don't need to go in the arable fields. It's only because you're cutting down these spaces all the time.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yes, I mean, it doesn't. The crop deaths argument.
Yeah, because I can't think of the name of the plant off the top of my head, but there is a plant that they're already using quite a bit in Europe as almost like a natural insecticide, because they're all attracted to this and they plant it around the outskirts and they leave essentially the crops that are growing in the field alone. So it's kind of like a compromise.
Yeah, but Andy, you remember when we were talking to James? Now, James was interesting. He was a farmer, and at first he's very kind of resistant, and he was saying, "Oh well, vertical farming it can't be done. It's not feasible and all that." And then when we kind of spoke to him about it and about subsidies and that, he kind of admitted that it kind of was. But you talked about those plants around the side of fields, and he said there's bylaws
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
preventing that, didn't he?
Yeah, he said that it was restricted because of the roads and all that kind of thing. But again, moving into this quote unquote vegan world, there would be bylaws that we'd straight away say, well, they're pointless. As long as they're not going to cause problems for those driving on the road, they're a solution. That why can't we look at things like this?
See, and I think the other thing is that obviously crop deaths are caused by mechanical farming, right? So one solution to it would be to go back to more manual farming and to a lot of farming by hand and without the use of machinery. And I know there's people horrified about that, but look, that so much work is pointless. So much work is done to produce stuff we don't need. So much work is kind of is soul destroying that people do. And so I think to have an agrarian society where most people worked on the lands would actually be better than what we've got now. Would give people improved quality of life. And I'm not talking about people slaving for long hours. They wouldn't need to, because as I said, so much work that we do is like for no useful purpose. So let's all do work for a useful purpose.
Well, again, you see, Jim is saying it'll be impossible. You see, the first response, Jim, from farmers we find is that any idea that we put up, it's just ruled out.
Yeah, I mean, look at how many times I've heard it, or we've heard it, where people have said, well, vertical farming, that's not scalable on a large scale. Well, once upon a time, flying people around the world wasn't even thought about, let alone scalable and commercialized and everything else. So, yeah, until we actually try something, I think it's really ignorant to say that's not possible.
I don't see why it's not possible. It's just that you have an activity that's labour intensive, and where people's labour is used to do that.
It would certainly change the nature of society. For example, if you think about the United States in the 1950s or say the 40s, where you used to get these kind of farmers, these homesteads and everything, they're all pretty much, in terms of social class and status, they're all pretty much of a muchness. And so they would all help each other, and they would barter and swap things and change things and help. And then, they go from farm to farm as a group, kind of bringing in the crops and this kind of stuff. So it would go back to that kind of thing. So society would be much more communal and much more cooperative, which are vegan values.
Well, absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
And this is what one of many solutions. Obviously, a vegan-run society, would look into bringing about to minimise crop deaths. It's not just about crop deaths. It's all our, the whole way in which our way of life negatively impacts on other animals. And another big example is our transport system. If you look at the number of animals killed on the roads, like people quite rightly, or most people in this country quite rightly hate fox hunting, but more foxes are killed annually on the roads than they are by hunting. I think twice as many. I mean, the badger cull, I think at one time it was stated that the badger cull was aimed at killing 100,000 badgers. Well, 50,000 badgers.
Hello. I don't think anyone can hear me. Hang on, let me start it and do it again. Can anyone hear me? Oh, you can. Okay, we'll save me starting it again. Yeah, sorry, I don't know. I think my phone started, so I'm not sure. I think it was my phone crashed, but at least it managed to pause the live or whatever it did, and then asked if I wanted to resume it.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Yeah, I think we're okay. I think my phone had a bit of a nightmare. I think it overheated.
Oh, right. Yeah, I got a message saying that you'd kind of bailed out or something. I
Yeah.
thought,
It just basically TikTok just died all of a sudden. It just went off, and then when I loaded it, it asked me if I wanted to resume the live. Luckily, so
very good. There was an interesting thing actually from Jim again. Because he was responding to Ronnie's idea about this kind of communal farming and there's a lot of work which is soul destroying. It's not very productive and all that kind of stuff. And so we could put a lot more people back on the land. You're saying the Pick for Britain campaign to pick our farmers' fruit because of the there was no foreign labor, as it were, that kind of issue, Brexit and all that. But this is during lockdown, and it said failed because people are lazy. Well, I'm not quite sure how you can address that. Can you hear me, Ronnie?
I can. I think it depends on the ethos of state. I mean, we're talking of a situation where we have a vegan administration. We're talking about why people should go vegan and why vegans should encourage and help other people to go vegan, and so that we eventually have at least a vegan run society. Now within that society, there'd be a massive culture change. We'd have a culture change where people would want to do their utmost to protect other animals, their utmost to minimise adverse human impact on other animals, and so you'd have loads of people that would be kind of happy and willing to bring about that change, because we would have changed the culture.
yeah. Well, and I mean, I don't think that people probably are potentially lazy when it comes to certain things, but that's because so much is handed on a plate to them. If things were different, then people would feel much more involved. I'm sure if you said to someone, you haven't got to go to work for this big company anymore to earn them money. Instead, you've got to go and work 3-4 hours, come home, and you've earned enough, or you've brought back enough produce to feed the family. People would be much more inclined to do that.
Bring back national service. That's what I say.
I'm sure if everybody was working to potentially trade with someone else and they were directly 100% benefiting from their work, as opposed to someone else usually benefiting from their work, people would be a lot more incentivized to do it.
Yeah, well, this is a fundamental challenge to capitalism now, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, lots of these people that are employed to do picking and things like that are usually exploited.
Yes, I think that's true. It would be within a completely different social setting that this would be done. I mean, basically, the fundamental, what we're fundamentally saying is that people should go vegan, and we're promoting the vegan ethic, and
Are we saying that, Ronnie? Are we saying that?
we say that's what we always say.
It certainly is.
That's what it's all about, you see. So if we had sufficient people, becoming vegan, all these things would fall into place, because the most important thing to all of those people would be that that we want to absolutely minimize the exploitation and oppression that exists in the world, including and especially because of the numbers towards other animals. And so we'll be doing
on that note, though, talking about the numbers, and it's gone 9 o'clock now, so I can be a bit more controversial. Is it just a case of having numbers? Let's say theoretically we get to 30% of the UK population class themselves as vegan or plant-based. Is it just a case of having the numbers, or do those people actually need to understand what the cause is too?
I think there's kind of, you see,
because otherwise, surely won't the kind of changes that people push, won't they be welfareistic as opposed to?
I mean, I'm talking about, yes, I mean, I am talking about, I'm not just talking about people that just eat a plant diet. I'm talking about people that are kind of, are vegan and understand what veganism is. And so, we kind of have to, the education needs to be a continuing process, because somebody may switch to eating a plant diet. That doesn't mean they're vegan. Doesn't mean they understand what veganism is all about. So our educational process would have to continue with those people, so they kind of properly grasp what the concept was. But yeah,
Sounds like a burner phone you wanted for a raid.
No, it's an alarm going off for
Oh,
some reason.
right.
Phone. I normally when I do the videos, I normally turn it off, but I'm kind of a little bit more relaxed tonight, so I've forgotten to do it.
That's good to hear.
But yes, I mean, I think yes, we'd have to. I'm talking about like people that are properly vegan, and yeah, 25-30%. Yeah, that's probably about the figure. And it sounds like a big ask, but it's not nearly as big as an ask as 100%.
No. And I suppose on those kind of figures, if it was 30% actual vegans, then it would probably be more like 50% plant-based, or even more than that. If you took in the grand scheme of things, yeah, we'd probably be already over halfway.
Yeah. I mean, there'd be lots of people kind of that weren't really there, were sympathetic. And it's just a question. This is why vegan education needs to so much greatly increase, and so that we can get there. I mean, our current government was elected by less than 30% of people eligible to vote. You see, so that's kind of what we're looking at in terms of politics. If we want the votes for a vegan administration, that's what you're looking at.
I don't think the people who vote for this government can be called people, Ronnie.
Well, it makes you wonder about their sanity, doesn't it? But you see, most people don't act in their best interests in lots of different ways. You look at people that do stuff all the time that damages their own health. All the time, people don't act in their best interest.
I think it's a bit unfair now on that one, though, Ronnie, in the sense that it's all coming out now that all the people who were, promoting Brexit, Johnson and all the rest of the crew. I mean, it's all been exposed that they didn't believe it themselves in the first place. They were lying. So it's not that people deliberately went against their best interests. It's that they were lied to, wasn't it?
No, I think people are easily led, and so they're easily misled. And I think that people were misled over Brexit, and that's all coming out now. And I think people's sort of xenophobia was used.
Well, they were misled about the opposition too. I mean, some people I've seen comments as recently as in the last few weeks where people go, "Well, it was still better than getting Corbyn." How?
Well, how is it better than getting Corbyn?
Exactly, but that's the framework that they've got to have, and that's very similar to like how they feel about us.
But do those people, understand what Jeremy Corbyn really stood for and the values that he espoused? And
well, they didn't get a chance, did they? I mean, they manufactured all that.
They just fell for the demonisation instead.
Yeah, that's right, because he was demonised because there's powerful business interests didn't want him to have any sort of control. That was why. And you see, I mean, that's the problem we have.
Here's one for you, Ronnie. Joanna is saying, I agree with Ronnie. Well, somebody agrees with you, Ronnie. Humans are self-destructive and naive, but the problem is that isn't a great indicator that we're going to get a vegan world.
Well, I think the thing is that what happens is people are easily led, and they're conned into doing things that actually harm themselves. I mean, when you look at you look at, say, people are encouraged to consume stuff that's harmful to their health. Like stuff that's high in fat, that's high in sugar. They're encouraged to drink loads of alcohol. I mean, it's not all that long, since people were profusely encouraged to smoke tobacco. That's only an end in recent years, isn't it? So all the time people are encouraged to harm themselves so that other people can make money out of it. And so basically that we've got to, this is where the educational process comes in, so that we can educate sufficient people to become vegan, so that we can the fundamental we can be the ones that are in charge, and so that we put a stop to all these influences that are causing people to harm themselves.
this is why it's so important for people to understand that veganism is not a diet; it's a philosophy and it's a way of life. And it's a vegan world would be radically different from what we've got, because we would actually then have a population of people who are critical thinkers rather than easily led.
Yeah, and we'd encourage people to be critical thinkers. People are discouraged from that.
Well, we can't have veganism without it, can we?
No, we can't. No, we can't start on that process until we've got a sufficient number of people that are like that. But then, when we've got a sufficient number of people like that, then we can start educating the other people.
So Lily's got a lot of important things to say. I imagine there might be a lot of swear words involved.
Yeah, I mean, if it's so important, please elaborate in the chat.
Yeah, give us a clue.
Yeah.
Yeah, but and you know, this is why it's so important for vegans to become active in educating others to become vegan. You know, because everyone's vegan, wants that type of world, but we're not going to get that world's not going to come about by magic.
Somebody says, I grow fruit in greenhouses. We kill more animals than the meat farm. Well, I mean, that's interesting, but why? Why would that be the case?
Yeah, I mean, especially if you're growing in greenhouses.
Yeah, and also, what about on the meat farm? What about all those vegetables that are grown to feed the animals that are reared on the meat farm, and all the people that are killing other animals that they see as a threat to those vegetables? You see, that you have to take that into consideration as well.
I mean, again, I suppose we would be thinking of transferring farming that goes on in greenhouses, because presumably they're not as biosecure as vertical farming, is to move them even more indoors in that sense. Would you say, Andy? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That they can definitely still be protected straight away. I mean, if we're talking, so we can't be completely naive and think that if we move to something like vertical farming, there may not be other aphids and insects that probably may not even exist at this moment in time that will kind of come into fruition from how we farm. That's just kind of how we've always had to deal with things. However, in terms of small mammals, birds, this kind of thing, absolutely, completely no longer an issue.
I mean, presumably, we're talking about insects, surely. There.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're talking about microscopic insects like green fly and smaller. That they would be the issues moving forward. Yeah, we'd be talking about microorganisms for the most part.
Yeah, and so, well, I mean, maybe people might say, well, you're being a bit naive if you think that you can keep rats and mice out of a greenhouse.
Well, it doesn't. The difference is it doesn't need to be a greenhouse. I mean, do people feel quite capable that they can keep rats and mice out of their places of work where they sell food?
My answer to that would be that no one, from a vegan point of view, has designed a greenhouse.
Exactly, yeah. And I mean, people will happily go to McDonald's quite safe that they managed to keep the rodents out, right? Well, they're only using a building. They've got no special technology.
Rodents and rats will never be stopped. I remember being on a SAB once, and I did a foolish thing and got involved with a debate with the followers, because they look to do that, so you can't concentrate on the sabbing. And this guy was saying that, it's impossible to keep foxes away from chickens. And I was going, so we can go to the moon and back, but we can't keep a fox away from a chicken? So I tend to think that, well, it's the same problem here. If the idea of a greenhouse was to perform like a greenhouse, but also to exclude beings being called rodents here, rodents and rats, well, rats are rodent anyway. Well, surely if they're designed in a kind of vertical farm sense, and so you'd have biosecurity at the doors and all that, presumably you wouldn't have those big kind of windows that open and that kind of stuff, right? You'd have to have ventilation. We just do it a different way.
If this is how we were farming, you'd have hundreds and hundreds of thousands of acres around the country now, which would essentially be rewilded, that these animals could live in without the need to come anywhere near your farm.
Yes, I mean, a lot of the problem is because you get this, like with seagulls, don't you? Like, someone makes a huge fuss because a seagull swooped down and stole their chip or stole their donut, and then all of a sudden they want all the seagulls in the world.
Yeah, which they're waving around in the middle of the air. Yeah.
But you see, what people don't realise is that we've depleted their food sources. That's why they've come and we've depleted the oceans, where they would kind of live naturally, and so they are gonna come and nick people's donuts and people's chips.
Yeah, of course. I mean, literally, I mean, where we live, Ronnie. I mean, Redditch, and I can remember even the playgrounds around the school. They're absolutely littered with seagulls because we've made it easy for them.
Yes, yeah, but it's because we've destroyed their natural.
Yeah, exactly that.
food.
So they found the closest thing to do, and that's now litter, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I mean, humans just chuck food around everywhere, don't they?
Yeah, exactly that.
Yes, that's right. And this is, people talk about, well, there's a problem with rats and mice and all that.
I'll tell you where the problem is less, whether you're talking about rats and mice or seagulls, is a society like Japan.
Yeah.
Because they don't litter.
Yeah, because of the cleanliness. Yeah, I mean, it's not even necessarily just litter, is it? Look at the designs that bird feeders have gone to over the last few years to protect the bird feeders, say, from squirrels or other rodents, or people are wary of putting bread out because it attracts rats to the garden, not just birds. All these things that are nothing to do with work or.
I want to know how to protect a squirrel feeder from birds, though.
That's a Dragon's Den idea.
Yes, yeah. But you see, this is the thing that that if we're in charge of society as vegans, then all the time on all these issues, we'd be seeking to minimise the harm done to other animals, whether that was food production, whether it was transportation, whether it was housing. In all areas of human activity, we'd be seeking to find solutions that minimise that problem. And you're only going to get that with the vegan-run society. If people are concerned about these things, if all these people going on about crop deaths are really concerned about crop deaths, for instance, and concerned about all these animals that are killed as a result of human activities, then the first thing they need to do is to become vegan and to promote veganism.
It's all balls, isn't it? It's like those people. It's all the people who complain about the so-called animal-derived products in iPhones. They won't even sign a petition to find out if it's true.
No, right? That petition's got about the same signatures now as it did like 2 months ago. Considering all these thousands of people that are so concerned about it.
This is it's false. It's
just a club to beat.
It's a dishonest.
Yeah.
Dishonest position.
Here's one for you though, Andy. Exile, and apologies, I'm not quite sure how to say the second bit, but Exile Ariun says that an animal will always take the easy option, but that's what you were saying, Andy, that we would provide the easier option than to eat our food, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's no different than coming back to sort of what we talked about at the very start with the fox. The vast majority of times that a fox is going to take, quote unquote, the risk to go and take a chicken, say, from a farm or from a back garden is usually because there's already been some element of human interference, because they'll already have a set place where they'll hunt or whatever, which has been taken away from them, or one of them, the two partners, has been killed and therefore they haven't got the time to go to their usual hunting spot. They've got to be quick to get back for the babies. So most of these things are actually human control. So if we were actually removing these obstacles in the first place, we weren't hunting the males, for example, then that wouldn't need to happen. They wouldn't necessarily need to go looking for these chickens in the first place. So half of these times, if we actually didn't take away the food source to begin with or interfere with that, they wouldn't need to go somewhere else, in exactly the same way with the seagulls in the sea. They've adapted now to a new environment that we've created, and then we moan at them for it.
Yeah, the other thing, the interesting thing about the thing Roger was saying about the hunt was it the Hunt supporters talking about the fox taking the chickens?
Yes.
Is that that apparently where a fox is hunted and chased over a long distance, if that fox managed to escape, then harm is still caused to that animal through it through the fox having to have run so far and
Absolutely. Well, the other thing that I've never heard anyone talk about also when it comes to this is, let's say hypothetically the fox is chased across counties.
Yes.
And manages to escape. They now
Yes.
have to restart basically, or they've got to travel all that way back, remembering exactly the way that they came to
Yes.
find their den again. So yeah, I mean, there's lots of long term,
and they're also weakened in
yes.
So they will take a riskier option in going after someone's chickens.
Yeah, they're quite rational foxes. There was this absolutely fascinating piece of research years and years ago. I think I mentioned this before to you, Ronnie, but I don't think to anybody else, was where they did this research. It wasn't vegan research, but they did this research where they allowed a fox into a hen coop, an old-fashioned kind of hen coop. And the fox killed all the chickens because they were panicking, the chickens.
Yeah, they do it to silence them, basically, don't they? Most of the time, it's not
Yeah,
actually because they'll only take what they can eat.
Yeah, that's right. And so then they put one chicken in, and then put a load of as it were already dead chickens, and there wasn't the total chaos then in that situation because there was only one live bird kind of trying to get away from the fox. But then the farmers often say they're indiscriminate killers, that they'll massacre an entire chicken coop. What they did then was they left the fox alone, and the fox systematically took each bird and made a larder, right? And they buried them in different places and all that kind of stuff. And so long as you leave them alone long enough, they will then take them all. Everyone they kill.
Absolutely. The couple of times when it happened on the sanctuary that I used to volunteer at, that's exactly what she would do. She would go and lay the others that had been killed and left in various parts at the edge of the land, and the fox would never come back to the coop again because they would just systematically keep coming back and picking up those other bodies. They would slowly, one by one, take them all. They just can only carry what they can carry. But yeah, it's like it's almost like a panic thing in the same way we sometimes see it with like serial killers and stuff, where they go in with the intention of taking out the husband, and all of a sudden the kids wake up, and all of a sudden it's a mass murder. It was never the plan, but it's like, shit, what am I going to do? They're making noise. I'm going to get caught. And it's kind of like
you're talking born identity there, aren't you? But yeah, I mean, it's true. But I mean, like, farmers have always, kind of tried to do this social construction of foxes as kind of evil killers and everything.
But who are the killers?
Yeah.
Which animal on this planet kills the most other animals?
And which one of those two is doing it unnecessarily?
Is that foxes or is it humans?
Yeah.
Is it any other animal or is it humans? It's humans, isn't it? By a country mile, or as seen as we talked about.
A long chalk.
Especially when you think there's no need for us to do this.
We're the mass killers. It's not other animals. And it was interesting. I remember some years ago I was doing a street stall, and this a woman farmer came up and says, "Oh, what about the foxes? Getting in and killing my chickens." And I said, "Well, do you eat chicken?" She said, "Yes." I said, "So why are you complaining about foxes eating chicken?" I said, "Because you don't need to eat chicken. You could live quite well on a vegan diet, whereas the fox doesn't need to eat the chicken. So that fox is more entitled to those chickens than you are. So what are you complaining about?"
Absolutely. And at the end of the day, if you're going to have chickens for yourself, for their eggs or whatever, you've got a responsibility to keep them safe from the fox.
Yeah. But ideally, those chickens wouldn't be kept at all because they're only kept.
Of course. Yeah.
Field, and of course they're that's once again another animal that's not native to this country. They're originated in the Far East, didn't they? What's the was some kind
guinea fowl?
Guinea fowl or something like that, or
guinea fowl, yeah.
exotic animal that, once again, that we've seen so many times, brought to this country, selectively bred, either to produce massively more eggs than they naturally would do, or the ones for eating in the broiler farms to gain weight so quickly that they can't even support their own weight eventually, and then killed at 6 weeks old. That's what we've done.
It does slightly damage your point, though, Ronnie. If you're saying chickens are not indigenous, then foxes have no need to eat them, actually. But
well, yes, but you see, the thing is that a lot of the other natural food source of foxes, it has been depleted by human activity. So once again, this is
us again. Yeah, it's always down to us, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. It's it's humans that are the problem. It isn't the other animals that are the problem. The other animals just want to get on with their lives and just to live, right? That's what they want to do. It's humans that have caused all these problems. We're the ones to blame, and we're the ones who need to sort it out. The way we sort it out is by going vegan.
I almost get the impression that we're not as clever as we think we are.
No.
Oh no, there's massive. It's arrogance. You see, this arrogance. Why is it that humans presume that our species is more important than other animals? We share this earth with the multitude of other sentient animals. Why do we presume we're them? Where does that arrogance come from? And that arrogance is actually our downfall, because it's that arrogance that actually has caused is the fundamental cause of the climate crisis, and it's the reason we're trashing our own planet, because we care so little about the harm we do to the natural world and the animals that live within it. Who cared so little about that? We've wiped out countless other species, right? But in the end, it's come back. Now everyone's panicking because it's come back to kick us up the arse. You see. And now that our species is in danger, everyone's running around, and well, not everyone, not enough people in actual fact, but there's a big worry and concern about it.
That goes back to the point about that the farmer, forgot his name, sorry, said people are lazy. I mean, they're going to be lazy while the planet dies.
Well, I think sadly. I think sadly a lot of them are lazy while the planet dies. Where are all the people? People moan because someone sat in the road and they couldn't get home in time to watch Love Island. You know what I mean? That's what's important to them. These tiny little things are much more important to people than the fate of the planet. What's the matter with you? What's the matter with you in your tiny lives?
Wants to talk about animal cruelty. Well, you picked the wrong live for that, I'm afraid.
Yes.
What? Yeah. I mean, what do you want to tell us about animal cruelty? Because really is the wrong live, I'm afraid.
You need to look for Earthling Ed or someone like that.
Yeah.
But you see, this is the trouble. It's this arrogance, isn't it, that has led to the problems we face. It's the arrogance of our species that has brought, it's brought the house down on ourselves.
Yeah, but Ronnie, what people would say to that, the answer to that point that you just made is that all species act in their own self-interest. That's what they'd say.
Yes, but we are not acting in our own self-interest. The human species is rapidly, rushing towards its own destruction.
And do you think we're the only ones who don't? Do you think?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely, and go out of our way to take that and remove that right from others.
Yeah, we're the most in that sense. We're the stupidest animal on earth. All this talk about intelligence, we're trashing our own homeland. We're trashing our own habitat.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one thing you could definitely say. Talking about like moral agency, we have the ability to do better and still don't. That's embarrassing, really.
No other animal does that. No other animal is stupid enough to do that. It's only the human, and we're going on about the intelligence of humans. What are you talking about? You know what I mean? The only way in which humans are superior to other animals is in our arrogance, or in the arrogance of our species.
Yeah, Colleen's saying our cleverness is not matched by farsightedness. I think that's true. You could always say that we're very clever, but we're not very wise, I think, as a species.
Yes, no.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
I mean, one of the greatest examples I like to use of this is it was very intelligent, say, potentially, to invent the atomic bomb. Not very wise, though, was it? Shows a lot of intelligence and technology advancement and skill and all that to invent something like that. But where's the wisdom there?
Yeah, like mustard gas or
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Or
chemical
even
weapons.
a slaughterhouse. Plenty of intelligence and design went into making it. No wisdom.
Yeah,
Well, no.
you know that worries me, you know, because when you think about it, you know, we've been talking about, you know, initial setup costs, and you think about vertical farming, but somebody had to make all those bits of equipment that go into a
Yep.
slaughterhouse.
It's actually worrying when you think about how big some of these machines are and how many people worked on in terms of like project management and project design, and each person designing their little cog in the wheel. How many supposedly great minds came together to create something so horrendous?
Yeah, it's mind-boggling, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
but it also encourages me that if those minds were used to do something good, that we've got so much capability there, so much potential intellect, and so much that we could achieve if we were just looking in a different direction instead of
Yeah,
trying to
I
maximize.
think that's really true. I used to be a projectionist, and we used to have to watch the cast and everything and all that. Everybody else went, and we were there watching the cast, and there'd be like hundreds of names going up. There'd be this absolutely crappy film. There'd be hundreds of names of people who were no doubt very kind of skillful in what they were doing, and I always used to think, God, if they put their effort into something useful. You know, it's a little bit like when you see football fans
Yeah,
screaming
football
and
fans is a
shouting and
brilliant
everything.
example. Yeah, absolutely. If they could unite on something that mattered and emphasize that same passion and the money they'll put into it, and the foot level, say they'll travel all around the world supporting the team, if only they could care about something that mattered. Yeah, absolutely.
It would be a different world then, wouldn't it?
But that's what does give me a little bit of hope, is that all of this horrendous technology and engineering that we have developed, where it's basically been kind of the subplot has been, how can we mass exterminate in the most efficient way? If we flipped that on its head and said, how can we survive causing the least damage to others as humanly possible? The capability to create that is essentially there. We've got all these people that if they did come together and put, this is the problem, this is what we're trying to achieve, this is the design plan, this is the direction we're now going to move in, we'd see such huge changes. It's only because we've never looked at it in that way. We've looked at it in how can we maximize profits and who gives a shit who gets in the way.
But it's ethics has become divorced from science, hasn't it? That's the trouble. And what we need to do is if ever they were together, what we need to do is bring them together. You know, that kind of scientific ability that's coupled with ethics, and we could achieve so much with that.
Exile is saying football saved my life. You can't say it doesn't matter. Well, I mean, I would immediately think about the value of grassroots football rather than commercial kind of millionaires kicking bags of air around.
Be
But I
interesting.
mean, be interesting. Can you elaborate? I mean, how did football save your life?
Yes, that is correct. I mean, I find it hard to imagine how football could save anyone's life.
Well, I suppose if it was used in the old-fashioned football is an escape from reality, so to speak, because what you look forward to at the end of the week. I can understand to that element.
The social thing. In fact, again, there was a brilliant documentary. Do you remember Matthew Paris?
Yes.
No.
Yeah. Well, he used to be a Tory MP, right? And so he agreed to go to Newcastle, Kevin, like this, and to live on the dole or the wages of the dole for 2 weeks, which was very kind of false, really, because he obviously went with all his expensive clothes that he'd already had and all the rest of it. So he wasn't really in poverty. But by the time he got into the second week, he was completely depressed because he couldn't buy anything. And he was having to kind of go into pubs and just stand there and let strangers buy him half a pint and this kind of stuff. But then he ended up on the terrace at St. James's Park, and he found a communal kind of thing, to do for a couple of hours. And it was very useful in that sense.
How did he afford to get into the ground?
I don't know. Maybe he bust in. I'm not quite sure about
Because this
that
is
one.
the problem, you see. It's not really, what we've got now. I can see football.
It wasn't much in those days. I mean, when I
You know,
started going to Leeds, it was something like 25p to get in.
yeah. I mean, it's become horrendous as these footballers being paid astronomical. Well, it's all a big money-making thing, and it costs a fortune to go and see a game. Certainly, at the kind of higher levels. When really, it should be something that as many people as possible could get involved in as a kind of a way of keeping fit and as a kind of enjoyment at grassroots level. That's kind of what that should be, isn't it?
Yeah, and
Rather than
what we don't need about football is all the tribalism. I mean, that is very kind of destructive. Your team can't do any wrong, the other team can never do any right, and
Yeah, and I think on that aspect as well, that's what I suppose to some people, especially if you're particularly lonely in your life, that I can see where that might come in to save you, because a football is like you're collective, aren't you? Even if you don't agree about politics or any of these other things, you're on the same team, you're all one. So I can kind of see how it would fill that void to some aspect.
Oh yeah, I mean, I get the social part of that completely.
Yeah. Because I mean, when I was a Villa season ticket holder, I used to enjoy going to the games with the people more so than the actual football. To the point where the last couple of years of Villa being a season ticket holder, half the time we used to sit in the pub in front of the fire and watch the game on the telly.
Villa, you masochist, you.
At least don't support dirty Leeds.
Well, when I was a sound engineer for a band, they used to rehearse just down the road from Villa Park.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What was that in Aston?
I don't know. It was just around the corner, so I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, it must have been. I bet that was a very nice place, to be honest.
The team I support is Forest Green Rovers.
Yeah.
And the reason I support that team is because it's a vegan. It doesn't necessarily mean all the players are vegan. I think one or two of them might be, or certainly they live on a plant diet. But the club itself is vegan.
I didn't
Come
know
on,
that.
Ronnie Lee. You don't know how to support a football team. Leave it out.
I didn't realise that.
Yeah, no, that they're I mean, they're not doing very well. I mean, they're bottom of League One at the moment. But
what is that through the ownership? Is it?
They're owned by the guy that owns Ecotricity, Dale Vince.
Oh, okay, right.
Vegan, and Ecotricity got a very vegan ethic. They've got this scheme where they provide vegan school meals for children. For instance, they've got a few different sort of vegan projects. All the food at the ground is vegan. On match days, the players eat vegan meals, for instance.
Yeah, somebody just mentioned Big Dunk. That's Duncan Ferguson. I wonder if
he's the manager now. I mean,
is he the manager? Oh, right,
yeah.
Okay.
I mean, they won League Two last year, but they haven't done so well in League One this year.
Yeah, well, Ian runs on plants, right? I think Big Dunk did say that he was interested in plant-based eating, I think.
Yeah, he has expressed an interest in it. I don't think it's anything he's really.
Where is Forest Green in the country? Where are they based?
It's near a place called Nailsworth in Gloucestershire.
Oh, okay.
Which is kind of, I don't know whether it's about 15 miles south of Gloucester, near Stroud. It's near Stroud.
Oh, right. Okay.
That kind of area, and I've not been there since they kind of really revamped their menu or anything, but apparently the vegan food there is really good, and it's all eco-friendly.
Don't they have wind turbines and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, it's all.
They have wind turbines, don't they?
It's all powered by green electricity, because of course Ecotricity, they're a green electricity company, and the pitch is organic or veganic, I think the pitch is. And so they try to be green in every possible way they can. And what actually happens is a lot of other clubs, I think not just football clubs, but other sports clubs actually, go to see them to learn about how they can make their own clubs greener. There's a lot like a kind of standard bearer in.
Well, we were having this conversation before as well, and I mean, there's still too much stigma, really, that there may well be quite a lot of quote unquote vegan players that have yet to come out because they don't need the shit. It's not going to enhance their careers in any way, shape, or form, is it, really, for the most part, by saying this? So it may well be something that's far more across the board, just from a diet perspective, than we know.
I think it might be one of those things that kind of, once it reaches a certain level, it'll suddenly expand. Because there's certainly no problem in terms of fitness. I mean, anyone that doubts that athletes can maintain fitness on a vegan diet only needs to have to watch a film called The Game Changers.
Yeah, well, Dominic Berry, the kind of vegan queer kind of slam poet, he says that coming out as a vegan is worse than coming out as gay. And so we had all that stuff about, the fashion news and all that. And, being gay in the football world was very, very difficult for many, many years, and still probably is. And so maybe coming out as a vegan is just as hard.
Yeah, I mean, because the thing is, the judgment isn't going to be coming really, for the most part, from your fellow players, is it? It's coming from the crowd.
Yeah, every time you make a mistake,
without being disrespectful, the most intelligent bunch of people on the planet.
Yeah, there better not be any vegan goalkeepers, because they just get loads of stick, won't they?
Yeah, carrot fingers or something like that, wouldn't it be?
Yeah,
it'd be. But you see, I think the thing is, from the like fitness and stamina point of view, there is a lot of evidence that it's the best diet to adopt, and providing it's done in the right way. So that would. I mean, like you get other kind of top sports people that at least live on a vegan diet. I mean, Djokovic, the tennis player, he's plant-based.
He describes himself as plant-based. He's never said
plant-based. He's plant-based. So at least that diet doesn't do him any harm.
Talking of vegan goalkeepers, though, after watching the debate
David
from '89, I had a quick Google again about David Icke, and apparently he's plant-based. Logic plant-based.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know whether the diet.
But yeah, I thought that was quite interesting.
With a side dish of lizards.
Yeah, lizards. I'm not sure how he feels about that.
But yes, I mean, it's kind of. I think that it is something that's kind of growing within. I mean, like, wasn't it? Was it Venus Williams, Serena and Venus Williams? Aren't they vegan, or one of them? Or
what? I can never remember which one.
It's Serena. It is.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of top sport people that are
both male finalists, Djokovic and what was the other one's name? I can't think now. Both the finalists from last year were vegan.
That's right. Yeah.
Well, they were
plant-based, yeah,
plant-based, or kind of claimed to be. Certainly, Djokovic was the other one.
There's a few rugby players come out recently, hasn't there?
Yeah. So I mean, it's certainly possible to main fitness on the diet. There's not any problems with that, sort of whatsoever. And I think that's an area where there'll be an increase. There'll probably be a gradual increase at first, and then it will get a lot quicker as these things tend to go. And also, David Hay, the boxer?
Yeah, plant-based. Yeah, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah. There's from every single, and I think there's a very well-known cyclist on the Game Changers. There's people from all sorts of different.
Yeah, and obviously you've got Patrick Babuman as well, who potentially was the world's strongest man. I mean, he's been actually ethical vegan for a number of years.
I think he was Germany's strongest man rather.
Germany's, that's it. Yeah.
I used to know a guy who was a weightlifter, and he was the second best in the country at his weight level, and he was vegan. He'd been vegan years. So it's all across the board, all different sports.
There was a very famous early vegan, wasn't there, who was like a celebrity athlete, and people used to come from all over the country to watch him swimming and doing all these kind of races and stuff.
Yes, yeah.
Well, I mean, Fiona Oakes has been doing her stuff now for longer than I've been alive, I think.
Yeah, she hates running as well.
Well, hasn't she got? Hasn't she had some sort of operation on her kneecaps as well? Hasn't she got some sort of disability, which makes it even more, incredible?
She'd had wheels fitted, I think.
Because vegan runners, the sort of
Yeah, Ian, who
it's like that.
Ian runs on plants, he's a vegan runner.
Yeah.
He only has one kneecap. That's it. I knew there was some sort of disability, which just made it even more incredible that she's done the things she's done.
What have you got to do? Swap it over to the one.
I'm assuming it's prosthetic. The other one. But I knew there was something. I knew there was some sort of ailment that she had, which just made it even, just fantastic that she's done all the things she has.
There used to be a woman long distance walker. I don't even, and she used to claim that she lived on grass.
Yeah.
Do you remember who that was, Roger? Do you remember? This is years and years ago.
No, I think I'd have forgotten that on purpose if I'd known.
When I was a kid, and people used to say she just eats grass. Now, whether they said that because she was a vegan, I don't know. But I remember, I can't remember what her name was. She used to walk like the length of the country and all that, and just kind of. People said, "Oh, she just eats grass at the side of the road." But whether they were taking the piss because she was vegan,
Probably.
I really.
Well, you'd hope so on the grounds that it couldn't be true.
No, it could be true that she just ate grass, but perhaps that was their way of kind of, how they interpret.
Unless they meant marijuana.
Yeah, that would enable her to walk a long distance, wouldn't it? Kind of not in a straight line.
Yeah. Yeah, she'd always be there, but never win.
That's right, yeah. But folks, I think I'm going to have to go. I didn't realise the time. It's
no worries. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's been in for my first time on TikTok. It's been good.
Fiona Oakes won the North Pole Marathon. Well, yeah, that's right. She ran over the ice, didn't she? In that,
yeah. She's done a number of ridiculously crazy things.
I think she ran through a desert as well, didn't she?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Right, folks. I'm gonna split as well. So it's been good to chat, though. So I hope you can come back next week, Ronnie.
Yeah, I hope so. It just depends. Saturday evening sometimes are busy for me.
Before you both jump off, do you want to talk about any shows you've got planned for this week, or anything you want to advertise whilst you're still on here?
We've got a show, haven't we, Roger? We've got another edition of Us Still Alive, providing we are still alive on Tuesday evening UK and Ireland time at 7 p.m. Which we'll be talking about. What is it? Animal liberation in the land of a-holes, it's called.
That's it, yeah. Ooh. Which was your idea, I think.
My idea, yeah. All that dirty language is my idea. Which should be kind of how do we achieve animal liberation when everyone seems so bloody stupid?
Well,
that sounds like an interesting show.
Yeah.
Well, it goes back to that lazy point that we've talked about today, in a way, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it should be worth, and it's live streamed, so people join the live stream, they can make their comments and stuff, and we put, shows and comments up on the screen and discuss them and stuff. So it's, I'd say it's worth. I'm biased, of course, but I'd say it's well worth tuning in.
and then there's a time tunnel on Thursday. I'm just I've got two lined up, and I'm trying to work out which one it is. I think this is the one where we're talking about when the movement switched from vegetarian to vegan. And that wasn't that long ago. It's quite a shocking story in terms of the animal movement being frightened of veganism until really, really recently. So and again, those who promote pressure campaigns, they tend to like to say things like, "Oh, we've been doing vegan education for decades and decades," and all that, which is not entirely true. I mean, you can trace it to the mid-90s at best, and even then, it wasn't very well developed, and it was resisted by all the major groups.
And how far back can we trace pressure campaigns?
Oh well, they go back a good while.
Yeah.
Well, if you're talking about pressure campaigns in terms of right to your MP, they can be traced back decades. probably to the turn of the century, turn of the last century, the 1900s. But in any big way, I suppose, probably from the 1970s, I suppose, something like that. Kind of when it got to be a bit more than just write to your MP.
Well, what wasn't the League Against Cruel Sports? That was 1925, wasn't it?
Their campaign, but what I'm saying that they mainly campaigned in. I mean, they did the odd demonstration, didn't they? But it was mostly send us money and write to your MP, wasn't it? Like a lot of these organisations.
Well, that would be pressure on the political system, then, wouldn't it?
But yeah, yes, that's right. So but still, to me,
so in 100 years, what we've progressed is instead of send us your money, it's sign up for our Patreon and write to your MP. That's basically what we've progressed in a century.
It's kind of still all about sending people.
Yeah, it's still about super chats now and Patreon instead of sending us a check or a postal order. That's the progress we've made.
I think the nature of of how people have tried to exert the pressure has kind of changed. I mean, obviously, the ALF could be described as like a huge pressure campaign, perhaps in some way.
I think it wasn't it? Financial pressure on that. I'll tell you what, if we were really a justice-based organisation, every single vegan influencer would boycott the idea of these bloody super chats and all that kind of shite.
Yeah, of course.
It's a disgusting idea. Making vegans pay you to be able to talk to them.
And that would be the issue, coming back to this 30%, that if these were the kind of people who were at the forefront of people's minds, then it wouldn't necessarily solve all these problems, not unless you threw some money at them.
No, I mean, the way I kind of advocate that we sort of, the only way I think we're going to get anywhere near that number is through what I'd call community outreach. Rather where we get a lot of vegans doing outreach in their own communities. I think that's the only way we're going to really hugely increase the numbers, and that would be a very grassroots type thing, and it wouldn't really involve any of this money type stuff.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, money helps the grassroots, but it's not essential. But it does help. But you don't need a lot of it. But I mean, in terms of things like banners or a fold down table and a nice kind of banner to go around it and all that kind of stuff. I mean, a bit of money helps in that respect.
It does, but hopefully you'd be able to raise money in your own community from supporters to do that.
And the thing is about a lot of those things too, once you've brought yourself a table and a banner, it's not like you're buying a new one every week. That's kind of, that expense is taken care of. It's the constant ongoing giving to these people, like, X amount per day. Whereas that's ridiculous, because then you get into the levels of where you just become a small version of Peter, where all you're doing is hoarding all the movement's money, but you're not using it to better the movement. You're just using it to better your own personal life.
What worries me then is if they've got a heck of a lot of money, then providing they're in the tax system, which we presume they are, that means that they're going to be on a high tax band, which means they're going to be funding a lot of farming and vivisection.
Yep, absolutely.
The other thing, if we're talking about what's coming up, another thing I remembered, next Wednesday evening at 9 p.m, once again, this is UK and Ireland time, I'm doing
Sentient Rights Ireland, yeah.
Sentient Rights Ireland. If people go on to the Sentient Rights Ireland Facebook page,
it can't be 9. It can't be 9 o'clock though, Ronnie.
No, 7 o'clock. I'm thinking 1900 hours.
All right. Yeah.
It's 7 p.m. Sorry, not 9. And I'm doing a talk on how do we achieve animal liberation, which is like a really simple subject, isn't it? So
I wonder what you'll say.
Yes, I haven't. I've got no idea what I'll say, Roger.
No, it'll be a bit of a mystery for all of us, won't it?
So people can. I think people have to send an email for the Zoom link. So if they go onto the find the event on the Facebook page, Sentient Rights Ireland, and then
What you should do, you should open up and say, right, I'm not saying a bloody word until I get a super chat off all of you.
Yeah, that's it.
I'm missing a trick. I've missed a trick for years on this.
Or a super chat per word.
Yeah. Yes.
Can you imagine the ALF in the 70s, Ronnie? We're not going into that farm until we get a super chat.
Well, until we paid, we'd be waiting. We'd have been waiting around a long time, wouldn't we?
Yeah.
To be paid. All right, folks. We'll see you all soon, and take care.
Yeah. See you, Ronnie.
Thanks so
Thanks
much
a lot
for joining us. Thank you.
How are you?
So who have we got left? It's me and you now, is it, Andy?
Yeah, if you struggle to leave, Ronnie, I can boot you.
Yeah,
basically,
I'm not sure what button to press.
so next to where the camera was, there should be one that looks like two little people as an icon. You just click
See,
that.
Ronnie's not used to leaving a building because he just breaks into one and then the police take him out.
It's disconnect. If I disconnect,
do you need me to escort you from the building? I can do that.
Shall I disconnect? Would that be the one?
That's the one. Disconnect.
All right,
yeah.
Here we go. Disconnecting.
See you later. Thank you.
Folks. Bye.
He's a boy.
Oh, that's funny.
Right. Well, I'm all talked out. I haven't got a damn thing to say.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Unless anyone wants to quickly jump on, I'm more than happy to end it there. We've done 2 hours 20 minutes, which is absolutely fine.
Yeah. It's we're not supposed to be doing an hour, aren't we?
It was originally scheduled as an hour, yeah, and I think we've kind of. I don't think we've ever done an hour. I think we've gone over that every single time. But it's not. It's normally been worthwhile that we've gone over it. It's not normally like we've been sitting here twiddling our thumbs, thinking of something to say. I always enjoy these Saturday ones. I always learn something every single time.
Yeah, me too. Canadian vegan forever. I don't believe it, Roger. You don't believe what? About Ronnie?
Oh, true. Hi, Amy, by the way. Yeah, if you're ever interested, Amy, we always start this at 8 p.m., which would be 2 hours ago, UK time. Every Saturday night, if you ever want to join us.
Do you know, I've got an anecdote about Ronnie getting arrested for his big thing, but he disputes it, which is funny enough. But then he hasn't got as good memory as me because the people who arrested us all were from Sheffield, right? So they had thick Yorkshire accents.
Yeah.
And I think he was supposed to be in the bath or something. And they hammered on his door and they went, "We've come to arrest General." And that's where he got the General Ronnie Lee bit from.
Right, okay.
Because when it ended up in court, they could only make sense of the ALF by giving it a kind of military type hierarchy.
Yeah.
And so this is where the conspiracy came. They couldn't accept that people could act autonomously and organize themselves into little groups and act on their own and then let you know, as it were, after the event, what they'd done. Oh, no, you had to have somebody to tell them what to do.
Yeah.
And that was Ronnie. And so the police had to impose this hierarchical system on this kind of anarchic kind of idea, which wasn't even an organization. So it was totally ludicrous. And they said things like, oh, it was military precision and all this kind of stuff. Absolute crap, you know.
It is quite funny. So how did, obviously, like when all this happened and it was kind of like publicized in the media and stuff, how did they convince the public that Ronnie was this orchestrator? How did they convince people that he was able to control or encourage others? Because it's sort of like asserting it in that way, but how did they make the public believe that? Well,
it's same as Jeremy Corbyn. You get journalists writing books, and you get journalists writing articles calling him evil. Look at his evil little beady eyes and this kind of stuff. And
it's because it's like the least imposing and intimidating character you could meet.
Yeah, well, I know, but I mean, the point is that's not going to stop the press telling lies about him.
Yeah, I suppose.
You know, and so this kind of evil genius and this kind of stuff and all that, and you know, he had lieutenants or lieutenants as well, and foot soldiers and all this kind of shit. You know.
Did serious question? Did that give him an element of respect in prison?
Yeah, there's a really weird thing where well, there's two things. One, when he was getting near the end of his sentence, they started going out, you know, for walks and stuff, you know, together, you know, a little bit like porridge on the telly.
Yeah.
and Ronnie never went. And then somebody came back and grassed up this guy because he stamped on a frog or a toad, right? But the guy said it was an accident, and so and so this guy got grassed up to Ronnie. So Ronnie kind of called him in to his cell and said, I've had a report about you killing a frog. And he goes, "Oh, I'm sorry, Ronnie. It was honestly, it was really an accident and all this kind of stuff."
Oh,
and he goes,
that's
"Well,
brilliant.
this is my final warning to you," and all this kind of stuff. Right?
Oh, that's great.
And then there was another one where they're in the kind of exercise yard, and he was sat there reading a book, but he could hear a couple of other cons talking about him. And he goes, "You see that little guy down there? You know, he doesn't look much, but he killed a butcher, ripped him apart with his bare hands and this kind of stuff." Because that's the kind of thing that happens. You know, you get these outrageous kind of reputations and stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, some people try to do it on purpose, you know, to kind of enhance their status, kind of thing. You know, I remember when we used to go for dinner, there was this guy who he was a badger baiter, right? And he was always having a go, as he was saying, badgers are dangerous. I used to get the Guardian, you know, and one day I was stood there, and I picked up my Guardian, then we went to get the dinner and everything. And I was going, you know, you're right. It says in this Guardian that a bunch of badgers have constructed a nuclear weapon. And the guy goes, "There you are, you see, they're dangerous."
Yeah. Doesn't surprise me at all. But no, I think that's really interesting that actually that kind of like the police forced this kind of reputation on him that actually gave an advantage, so to speak.
No, yeah, the thing is, though, Andy, is that the conspiracy part of the thing would have fallen down without it.
Yes, of course, yeah.
Yeah. So you've got to think of like a bicycle wheel, and so Ronnie was in the middle. He was like the cog, and then it went out to all the spokes and everything. And so that meant the people at the end of each spoke were in a kind of conspiracy with each other, even though they didn't know each other, because they had a connection through Ronnie.
It makes sense, yeah. So how did that extend to, say, someone like yourself? How were you perceived in there? Like,
well, because I was a press officer, and really, I mean, the state essentially wanted to close the press officers down because we were making, you know, too much kind of fuss, really, and explaining this illegal activity. And so they mainly wanted to close, you know, close the kind of press side of it. And so the people who actually did some of the action, they were acquitted or they were given fines or something. But the people who were in the press office were given the big sentences, because that's what it was all about. That's why they brought a law lord out of retirement to be the judge. He was called Sir Frederick Lawson. And get this, which is always what pissed me off. In the 1930s, this guy stood for Parliament for the British Union of Fascists. So that meant that we were sent to prison by somebody who stood for Parliament for the British Union of Fascists. And you just think,
was that essentially to make the biggest example out of you that they possibly could?
Yeah, it was all again this idea of the social construction of Ronnie, the evil guy. For example, this guy, he had armed kind of officers with him on you know, when he was sat there being a judge. He would arrive in court in a bulletproof limousine or something every day, and go off to this special secret house and all this kind of stuff. And so, from the press's point of view, oh, this is a big deal. You know, this is a big thing. Yeah.
Yeah,
it's easy to do it. You know, it doesn't take a lot, you know, to kind of con journalists, because they're looking for a big story anyway.
That's very true. Yeah, you're already playing into what they're looking for, aren't you? So yeah.
Yeah, you are. Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
It's very interesting, but no, it's fascinating.
Well, Ronnie's got a series, it's online. I think it's on my website somewhere. Probably look in the playlist, and it's called Jailhouse Vegans, where he's telling all his.
I think I've seen that playlist, but I don't. Yeah, I have seen it. It's on your YouTube. I just haven't started it. I'll have to watch through those.
Yeah, because they were actually done to be fundraisers for sanctuaries.
So are all those episodes basically just stories, essentially, as it said, like from the inside?
Yeah. I mean, like, sometimes it was, funny story to do with the SABs and this kind of stuff. And but every week he used to have 4 or 5 kind of funny stories that he would tell.
Oh yeah, definitely. I'll have to give them a try. Well, I might watch one in a minute actually. But it's very interesting. But it also just shows like how in all this time that's passed, people haven't really changed their minds about those who do get involved in direct action. They're still perceived as extremists, terrorists, whatever.
Yeah, well, that's
There's
what
very
Colleen's
few people that see
saying.
you as
Even here in
liberators.
Canada, if you mention the ALF, people say, "Oh, they were so violent," which is ironic since we had a non-violent policy.
Non-violence policy, yeah.
Yeah.
But again, I suppose it all just falls into that demonization, that misconception. They only know what their press told them.
It kind of doesn't matter what the truth is.
No.
To be honest.
No, it's that. I mean, nowadays it's at most part it's trial by social media. It's not even necessarily the press that have to do it. Just individuals are capable of doing the damage with their own platforms.
Yeah,
the amount of misinformation that's spread by, say, someone just like Joe Rogan, for example, who's not a journalist, is he? He's just someone that gives people a platform to say whatever they like. So
yes,
that's kind of the issue now. Half of this demonization isn't, I mean, the media are terrible and as bad as ever, but a lot of it now isn't even necessarily coming from the media. It's just coming from individuals who have got their own agenda or just their own misconceptions.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's I mean, again, it kind of fights against the idea of getting a vegan world when you've got such almost like a miss. I mean, look at North America; it's even worse than Europe, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And that would always be the risk too, moving forward in that direction, that you had someone that was quote unquote seen as quite a big figure who then did the old switcheroo. They could influence so many people in turn because they'd already managed to influence so many people to go one way in the first place. That's the danger with so many of these people that go, well, I went plant-based or whatever because of Alex O'Connor. That should never be a reason for anyone, but that would always be a danger too. That the more people that were influential, that there's always the risk of them having a change of opinion or just saying something that's completely ridiculous, as we've seen many times before.
God's son was not vegan. Colleen is saying so much of history is probably fiction with history in inverted commas, because I always say that that's one of the things that the feminists did. They changed history to his story.
Yeah.
That's why language is very important within social movements.
Absolutely, and I mean that's a real key point. History is always written by the victors. That doesn't necessarily mean those that were right.
but it did mainly mean men as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, for a lot of times, I can't think of who the daughter was, the princess that was one of the first people that was allowed to learn Latin so that she could translate some of the ancient texts and things like that. It's ridiculous. Like, not to the point where weren't allowed to write about it. They didn't even know how to, weren't even considered to be taught. So yeah, absolutely, things have hugely changed since then. And that was so that these things, because you don't want that impartialness. If you want people to be influenced, you only want them to know your version of events. And that's how people have always been influenced for a long, long time. It's very easy. I mean, that's why, like, talking before we was on about the foundation, and it's like they probably didn't know about some of these earlier references in like Jainism and things like that, because it wasn't as simple as just typing these words into Google and getting a library in real time of every reference to that word. We're talking about 1940s. Unless you're going to go and sit in a public library and research these topics individually, you wouldn't know they existed.
Yeah, but the thing is, though, Andy, I mean, like you say, I mean, virtually everybody on the planet now, or at least a large percentage, has got access to global and immediate communication. We can get off this and start talking to somebody from New Zealand and all that. And we're the first generation ever to do that.
Yes.
And yet, has it improved anything?
No, not really. You could actually say that if anything, it's muddied the waters more so than ever.
Yeah, because there's so much misinformation and crap on the internet now, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. And to be honest, there has been since the get-go. I mean, once upon a time, even when like it was dial-up days and there was only X amount of websites on the internet, most of them were still crap. There were like websites dedicated to people's cats and all sorts of stuff. Those were the early first websites. It wasn't.
I
Really
suppose you haven't got. you haven't got peer review, which is obviously what the journals would rely on in terms of reliability and
Yeah.
and merit. And I suppose these fact check systems for election time, that's really kind of acting as a kind of peer reviewer in a way, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of it, I suppose, it's very similar to the TikTok censorship. A lot of it is very inconsistent and biased based on who the reviewer is. So it's not even necessarily fact checking sometimes. I mean, I've seen examples where people have been fact checked, say, by Facebook, and then they fact check the fact checker, and the fact check has been wrong. So, like, I think sometimes there's definitely an element of bias or at the very least influence in some of these decisions too, which is something that we're always going to potentially have.
Well, that's that's the argument about positivism, which is that the social sciences can't really be like a science in the sense that we're dealing with human beings, and human beings are all full of all kind of prejudices and biases and stuff. And so the idea that you can get a politically neutral social science, is kind of very controversial. Because it's you're talking about human beings, and it's human beings who are giving you data. I used to say when I was doing methodology that one great thing about collecting data from humans is that they can talk to you and answer questions. The problem with that is that they lie a lot.
Yes. Yeah. Or I suppose to give some people the benefit of the doubt, they don't even realise they're lying. They're simply repeating something that they believe to be the truth.
Yeah, well, that makes it even more complicated in a way, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, it does. Yeah, and I think that's the problem that we talk about with most people. A lot of these people aren't inherently going out of their way to lie, to be malicious. It's just the fact that they don't know any different. They're just repeating what they've always been told or always thought.
Yeah, but okay, though, Andy, on that one, would you apply that to the non-vegan comments that when they say crop deaths, when they say, well, you kill trillions of insects, and vegans kill more other animals than the meat eaters do. Do you think they're lying, or do you think that they think that's true?
I think it depends on what happens afterwards. So when they come in and just make the stereotypical topic commentary of like, well, what about insects though, for example, and then they've left the chat before you even finish replying to them. They've got no interest in that. But sometimes I think genuinely people have just seen like a Piers Morgan or Ted Nugent clip, or they've seen someone else type it, and genuinely you answer the question and they're like, I never thought about it like that. So it does happen sometimes. But I suppose for the most part, a lot of the times when we talk about especially these repeated excuses like bees, avocados, crop deaths, they are for the most part just people being malicious, yeah, because they've worked out it's a way of getting a response.
Yeah, and especially when you've got the same person doing it for months.
Yes, yeah, exactly that. But certainly there are some people, because I can remember probably 18 months or so ago, I had a conversation with a guy at Tesco Garage, in fact, that was going, but what about, all the insects? And I had a conversation with him and he was like, actually, you've got a point. So I think if they're willing to listen and it's something they genuinely think, then yeah, they're willing to be corrected. But most of the time, obviously, we are dealing with a lot of juveniles too.
Yeah, and also when you ask them a question back, nothing comes back to you, does it?
No, and I mean exactly as you sort of emphasised earlier, the only people who are really talking about this in a way that's like, well, what can we do about it, as opposed to, well, it's a problem, are us. I've never heard a non-vegan say, well, this is what we're doing currently, or this is what we want to do, or this is what I'm campaigning to do, or this is what interests me. I've never heard that. It's always vegans that are offering a solution or taking it into consideration, even if they are genuinely concerned. They still haven't got even a possible solution because they don't actually care.
That's the kind of opening gambit, isn't it? In the sense that if they accept what you just said, then they've got a problem. It's almost like the ball's back in their court.
Absolutely, yeah. Because once you realise that essentially just by maths alone, if it is something that you're worried about, then you're a much bigger contributor to this than I could ever be. Then yeah, the ball is definitely back in your court.
Yeah, so they resolve that by saying that we don't care about it or we don't know about it, which neither of those allegations are true.
Nope. But the fact, I mean, just the sheer fact that we've even done any research into this topic alone should kind of prove that. And the fact that we're doing more and more research into this topic all the time, I think I've learned more about crop deaths in the last 2 years than ever in the whole time I've been vegan, just because.
Exile is saying, I literally saved hundreds of bees every single day. Okay.
Saved them from who?
I don't know.
Oh, that's the guy that grows in the greenhouse. Saves bees, but kills everyone else. Is that because you need bees?
It was a bee growing greenhouse.
Is that because they've got a use? Because that goes against what you said earlier about having to exterminate all life.
Kerry is saying, I saved 15 newborn lambs today. Well, how do you work that out?
Saved them? Why? What sanctuary did you sign them over to?
We need bees to pollinate the crops vegans eat. Well, yeah, because there are no kind of vegan crops, of course, but you see that's another convenient little kind of construction, isn't it? Oh, vegan food, you know.
We are defending ourselves from a bully in your chat. Okay, I haven't been paying attention to the chat.
Oh, there's been all kinds of weird stuff, child brides and all kinds of stuff going on.
Oh, okay. That would be a good job. I haven't been paying attention then. I have a question about bees. Yeah, go on. Carry on, Ian. We'll probably end it quite soon, so feel free.
And then buzz off.
Yeah. I know I lambed them and made sure they didn't smother in cleansing, then colostrumed them. Not really saving them, is it? How do you feel about lab-bred bumblebees that are used for pollination?
I don't think I've heard of that.
Nor do I.
You mean like incubated, as it were? Like I mean, what do you mean by lab-bred bumblebees? I mean, that's a weird thing. But I mean, obviously, we don't know what we're dealing with. But I just find lab-bred bumblebees a really intriguing concept in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I was aware that like they potentially artificially inseminate the queen or whatever, but I didn't realize that was in a lab. I thought that happened kind of like wherever the beehives were. So it might be something I'm not aware of, or it might be just the process they're talking about. But I mean, I know that bees have been selectively bred in the same way that all farmed beings have been in some way, shape, or form, so that we can maximize them.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? I mean, when I was a kid, you would have seen bees and wasps kind of going from flower to flower and all this kind of stuff. Unless they were on strike because they wanted more honey and less flowers, but you never thought of the idea of bees and farming. They didn't seem to go together, did they?
It's very common. It's bumblebees, not honeybees. So I mean, this isn't something I'm aware of. So are we just talking about creating bumblebees that then are just released into the wild? I mean, I'm not 100% sure.
Well, you've got that argument about them being transported around the almond things in California, don't you? That one, yeah.
Yeah, but if these are I don't know. I mean, is this what they're talking about? That these are being essentially bred in a lab to pollinate crops?
Grumpy, have you heard about the blood market in Iceland?
Blood market? No.
Is that the country or the shop?
That's honeybees from. That's what I thought it was honeybees from. And so yeah, Ian, give me a little bit more information. It's not something I'm totally aware of.
That's honeybees. It's. You see, again, in terms of who's going to recognize the problem, I mean, if there's exploitation involving almonds, who's going to be the first to boycott almonds?
Oh, yeah, I mean, exactly.
I mean, there's already been some surveys
well,
done.
There already are. There's a group on Facebook. I'm sure it's called Vegans Against Almonds or something along those lines. So there's already little collectives that are already doing this, and it's kind of the same with avocados, isn't it? You know, who would be the first people to actively boycott them? It would be us.
And bees are not bred in labs; they are bred in hives. Well,
Hypolomia, okay.
but wasn't it you said lab-bred bees?
No, it's Ian that's talking about the bees. So this
Oh,
is what
okay.
I don't understand. I was under the impression that they were done in hives, not. So basically, bumbles are bred and then taken their hives to live their lives on farms. I wasn't aware this was happening.
Yeah, there's what I've seen is these kind of big articulated lorries with thousands and thousands of bees in them being shipped around, to do their stuff because of, again, the need for that is going to be
Is
traced
this
back to
because
something we've
the
done.
honeybees have already potentially decimated the bumblebee population? Like, what's the need for doing this?
Yeah.
It's something I'll have to research more about before I could really talk about it. I don't know enough about it. Really don't.
The bees we use are not bred in a lab. So Ian is saying lab bred bees and Exile is saying that's not okay.
So saying that doesn't happen basically.
All right, okay.
Because it's not something I'd heard about. I've certainly heard the claim of bees being flown all around the world and all this stuff, but not about them being produced in a lab, which obviously does. I'm sure those two things go together.
Also, you mentioned artificial insemination of queen bees. I mean, like, when did that start?
I have no idea. I have no idea, or why someone came up with this. I have no idea about these things. It's not something I know enough about.
Can you imagine that the conversation in the pub when that first came about? I got this idea, mate. We're going to start artificially inseminating queen bees. What?
Well, yeah, I suppose it's similar to like the way that they first came about with anyone else. I mean, even with like a cow, who came up with the idea of like, yeah, if we use this and we use this and we use this this electrocution device, we could get the bulls to ejaculate in an easy way. Who on earth was thinking about this stuff?
Yeah, well, that is a kind of business rational kind of decision in a way, because it kind of increases productivity and it decreases kind of problems. There is kind of logic behind artificial insemination in that sense. Plus the fact there's a genuine animal welfare case now because the bulls are too big to mount a female.
Yeah.
So there's that. So Exile is saying it started because the bees are almost extinct. Yeah, well, first of all, you got to go, well, that's got to be something to do with us, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially as they're so important. No, it's not nature that's doing this, is it? It literally is a human-related problem.
I'll tell you what, TikTok is not that conducive to have a serious conversation, is it?
No, I wish there was an option sometimes just for certain lives where you could give people just like an extra 100 characters or so at least they could explain themselves better.
Yeah. Well, Kerry, if you go to my YouTube, you'll see there's a thing, Ear to the Ground did something about artificial insemination. There's a massive artificial insemination plant in Enfield, which is just north of Dublin. And they were talking about teaser bulls. Teaser bulls are tied to the wall or sometimes to the ground for the other bull to mount. And then this guy runs in with an artificial vagina to collect the semen. But the reason that the bulls don't mount the cows is because they would break their pelvis if they did. Now, I'm not saying every single bull, because some of them are not bred to be so massive. But in terms of the general commercial bulls now, because most of them are artificially inseminated now, is that they're too big to mount a female.
Yeah. Well, I suppose in a lot of these places now as well, especially where they've got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of cows, it's just not viable either. Even if there wasn't the sort of size and weight constraints, they just haven't got the room for this kind of thing, especially not with the numbers we're talking about.
Yeah, Exile saying we literally kill thousands and thousands of aphids every day. Well, we're back to where we started here about are aphids sentient beings? Because we might have some reasons to care about aphids, but it wouldn't be animal rights philosophy reasons.
It's very true. And I suppose the other question would be, is there a possibility that we could do this and grow these plants without doing that? And potentially, yes. So,
Yeah.
either way, there's no, I mean, we're not the ones that are doing this either. Like, I mean, as you mentioned earlier, if there was like products in the supermarket, like cucumbers and tomatoes that literally say crop death 3, then those are the ones that we'd be buying.
Actually, when you think about it in the future, I wonder if that will come to be, you know?
Maybe.
And they presumably would be a bit more expensive. Just it would almost like a equivalent of free range or something, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I suppose so. Yeah, and I mean, it would be interesting if that was something that was brought in marketing wise, very similar to free range, whether others, the non-vegans, whether they take that into consideration, whether it was worth the extra 50p.
Yeah,
Joanna, they still wouldn't care.
Yeah, Joanna is explaining about the character limits and all that, and yeah, I heard you say that before, and I realize that's true. Doesn't quite help though, does it? Really,
no, it doesn't really help all the other countries that use the app. You'd think that it's not a difficult thing for them to address, really.
Well, it's a little bit like Twitter. I mean, Twitter was very limited at first, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And then I think they doubled their character allowance or something.
Yeah, and at least with Twitter, I mean, they used always from the beginning, so you could have like a website that would give you like long tweets and that kind of thing. So there was always a way around it where there isn't really on TikTok. There's nothing you can do.
Yeah, it was kind of like click for more. That kind of thing.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, or at least with Twitter, you could post like one of 3 with the slash, for example, and you'd be quite confident that all 3 tweets would post, whereas you can't even do that in the chat because it'll probably filter your middle message.
Yeah, it used to be these blog sites, right? They used to be like that. They used to, if you've got a long blog entry, they used to just post the first, 7 lines or something, and then have this, click for more, like you get on the online newspapers and that now.
Yeah. Well, even those though, to be fair, a lot of those nowadays. I mean, there's quite a lot of articles that sometimes I try and read, and it's like it'll let you read a third of it, and then it's like you need to sign up to read the rest of this, and it's like,
oh, I know, yeah, that's a super chat, isn't it?
Yeah, pretty much. But that's just to read news, and we're not even talking about recent news. This is news from like, I don't know, 2012 or something, and I still need to subscribe to read it.
Well, it's the same mentality, though, isn't it? Oh, look, you're interested in this subject. Obviously, because you've read this far, you're interested in this subject because you've come onto my live. But to get the full experience, you've got to pay.
Yeah, basically.
It's the same, isn't it? It's the same.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the question is, I suppose, especially when it comes back to like within the movement, most of these people that we're talking about, it's not like they're in a public arena where X amount of their money is coming from random people. I'd say 99% of their audience, 99% of their income is coming from people that are on the same side as them. All you're really doing is taking money from the movement as a collective and congregating it in one place. You're not taking the money from the general public. You're not taking money from people who would usually spend that money on, say, animal exploitation. You're taking money from people who will go out of their way to avoid it already.
Yeah, there is that disturbing thing about, I mean, we've talked about vegan bubbles and that in the past, but there's almost like been a creation now of content creators and audience.
Yeah.
And people deciding which one of those they are, but that's not really the way it's supposed to be, I don't think.
No, absolutely not. And you've also got, once that starts happening and once people start making money or have got decent numbers of people, those people influence the kind of content that they make going forward. So it's almost about, it just becomes about choosing your audience. You're not necessarily even reaching any new people anymore. You're just keeping that few hundred or thousand happy. And so your personality kind of shifts. I've noticed that with quite a few people. Where people were once quite outspoken, saying quite direct, that they're far more I don't know, subtle and calm now. And if you want to see what they really think about this subject, then you have to pay for that content. The free stuff's just quite kind of tame. And I think that's all completely wrong as well.
There's a few things that are completely wrong for sure. Right, well, it's coming up to 11 o'clock, and I've got a couple of slices of toast screaming at me from the kitchen.
No, crack on. We've gone on much longer than I expected to anyway. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you everyone for joining us. Again, if you wanted to catch Ronnie and Roger, that's Tuesday. Is it 7 o'clock?
Yeah, and you've only got to sign up to my Patreon, and I'll give you my bank account details, and then you can watch it.
It's only £150 down payment, and you can watch some of the old shows.
Yeah, I'll have cash through the door. Cash through the door first before you're allowed on.
Flipping hell. Well, lovely as always speaking to you. Thank you everyone who's joined us.
Yeah, thanks, Andy.
No worries. Thank you. Enjoy your toast.
Oh, I will.
Thank you. See you later.